Tuesday, everybody. Welcome to the Sean O'Connell Show. The tease that we gave you for the show, actually quite inaccurate, I regret to inform you. Still going to be a great show, still going to be a football-centric show, still going to be a really excellent show. Ryan Leaf had to push, and Jeff Schwartz had to push to later in the week. So, we have Jerem Jordan for some red and blue. We have JT Wistersill to check in on the Utes. We have some over-unders that we're going to get to here at the top of the show. I keep saying we're going to do these, and we haven't done. I like going over the numbers. I like going over the precedent. I like taking a look at what our expectations should be for Utah football. So we're going to do a little bit of that. Some NFL storylines to jump into. I have kind of deliberately stayed away from a lot, like the bulk of the conversation around the Kalani Sitake and Brian Santiago perceived feud, because there's just, to me, is there drama there? Is there intrigue there? Is it something that if I'm a BYU fan, I'm paying very, very close attention to? Of course. You tune into this show because you want to hear Utah football. You want to hear a little bit of Mammoth. You want to hear some NFL stuff. And yes, I am more intrigued and more interested in BYU football than almost all of you are as listeners. I got more love for Kalani Sitake than most of you are probably comfortable with. I know other guys on that staff. Chad Kaha'aha'a, love that dude. Aaron Roderick, love that dude. Tyus Moy, all the way down. Like, there's a bunch of really Gary Anderson's down there. There's a bunch of people that I have a ton of love and respect for on that staff. There's players that I want to see be incredibly successful there. Guys that we followed in their recruiting cycle, guys that were at the University of Utah in the case of Keanu Tonavasa, right? I am intrigued by the happenings down there in a way that I would be all in on this. But I'm trying to serve you, my audience here. 877-353-0700. If you have any thoughts on it, just text them at me. It might not even make the show. We might not even get into it on the show. And the reason I don't feel like it's something that we have to justify talking about or we have to talk about a lot on my show, not that it isn't a mega story in the state and in the state of football here with the season approaching, but I've said it before, I will say it again. I just don't know how much it does on the field. Until it's something that's a big enough rift that Kalani Sitake takes a different job. Because the Penn State thing almost happened. But ultimately, that worked to Kalani's advantage. He got a raise from BYU. His assistants got raises from BYU. He got a deeper commitment from the booster base to provide NIL, to provide. You saw in the article, and there's been really good stuff done. Adam Rittenberg is actually going to join us on Thursday, and he wrote an article for ESPN about how Kalani Sitake is your favorite coach's favorite coach, how everyone in college football likes him. That by itself is enough for anyone who is maybe not his biggest fan down in Provo to say, well, I'm not winning this battle. All right, Kalani is the dude that everybody wants to be friends with. So in the court of public opinion, I have already lost this case. It only affects Utah. It only affects the BYU bottom line, and I'm not talking about the financial bottom line. I'm talking about the win-loss bottom line. It only affects that if Kalani leaves. And I will tell you again, Kalani Sitake ain't leaving. It's not happening now. It's not happening after what is going to be a very successful season at BYU. Kalani is not going to, if it really comes to a head, if it really boils over in Provo, it will not be Kalani Sitake that leaves. I am confident in saying that. The tiny little caveat, the eensy-weensy asterisk there, is if a USC job opens, a Texas job opens, a true blue blood job opens, and Penn State, you could say, was that. But a true blue blood job opens, and the market for coaching has been reset over and over and over again. And maybe, if there's an $11 or $12 million offer, at some point, BYU has to say that's too rich for our blood. At some point, they just have to, right? Crumble cookies are not going to cover the extra $4.5 million between what they are willing to pay him and what the top coaches in college football are making right now. I don't think anyway. Maybe they will. And there's also, again, this is the tiny asterisk. There's also the possibility that Kalani or people close to him in his camp say, like, let's say BYU does. I know it's a curse for me to put this even out there on Utah airwaves. Let's just say that BYU does have their greatest football season ever this year. And they win a Big 12 championship, and they make it into the college football playoff. And make no mistake, that would be a better season than their 1984 national championship. It would be. Even if you're a BYU fan listening, you have to acknowledge that, because in order for that to happen for BYU this year, you would have to have beaten Notre Dame, most likely, or at least played them close enough that it didn't disqualify you from playoff inclusion later on. If you win a power conference championship, that is better than beating a 6-6 team in the Holiday Bowl. It just is, to finish your season. I'm not trying to diminish the 1984 national championship. I'm just telling you that if BYU does what a lot of their fans think they're capable of doing, what Sports Illustrated thinks they're capable of doing, what Adam Rittenberg thinks they're capable of doing, then it would be their best season ever. You could get a situation where Kalani, his agent, Aaron Roderick, the people close to him, the people that have helped him along the way, have a realistic conversation and say, all right, we have reached the pinnacle for BYU. We are never going to win a national championship in a 12-team college football playoff. You got here, maybe you won the first game, whatever. Let's just say this is a pie-in-the-sky dream for all BYU fans. You've achieved some ridiculous 2026 goal. You're playing into 2027. You are one of the final 8 teams, let's say. You're one of the final. Maybe you make it to the final 4. Maybe if that mountain is climbed, then there's an acknowledgement from the Satake camp that I don't think I can do more than that at BYU. And by the way, who's to say something like that doesn't put you on NFL radars? And NFL radars are totally different than college football coaching radars. I don't see that necessarily being the case, but who knows? So I guess I've just double asterisked here. There's 2 little stars next to all these points I'm trying to make. The main point in bold, whatever your favorite typeface is, wingdings, Kalani Sitake ain't leaving BYU. And the tiny little asterisk is unless the outside offers become too lucrative for the brethren to feel comfortable matching them, or this season is so good that he realizes it can't get any better at BYU, and then maybe it's time. I don't foresee either of those things happening, and so this 9.5 minutes is basically all I can justify on this show, because other than that, what's going on at BYU right now is just Real Housewives of Provo. It's just people who might not get along having to work together at a very, very high level. And one of those people is everyone's favorite guy, and the other one of those people is maybe the right choice for his job. It's not a fair fight in Provo when it comes to a public perception, court of public opinion, BYU fans having to take sides, boosters actually having to take sides. As much as we're told they don't care about it, the folks in downtown Salt Lake City at headquarters, if they have to take sides, the person whose side they're going to take is the one who has said, I want to be the Polynesian Lavelle Edwards. Right? I mean, he is he's too good to be true, Kalani Sitake. You don't pick a fight with somebody like that. You don't get into a war of words with somebody like that. You don't get on the wrong side of the fence or break a promise to people like that. You don't. And if that has happened, as is alleged, then the parties or party, maybe it's singular, maybe it's multiple, on the opposite side of that are going to find themselves on the short end of the stick in Provo. It's not going to change the status of the football program's ability to win. I can tell you that. It just isn't. If anything, the outcome of this feud makes them better. And that should be your fear as a Utah football fan. So, by all means, keep reading the well-thought-out pieces that are still rolling off the presses. The proverbial internet presses, I should say. But understand that ultimately it is stuff that as soon as the first game is kicked off, you are not going to think about again until the next offseason. You are not going to hear Brian Santiago and BYU football and Kalani Sitake in the same sentence until the season is over. Unless it's somebody saying, oh, man, you would have beat Notre Dame if that promise hadn't been broken. But that'll be on a Cougar Board post somewhere. Long live Kalani Sitake as the BYU head coach. They should and will allow him to stay, fight for him to stay until he wants to retire there. And he is going to be, or he potentially could be, the Polynesian Lavelle Edwards, but it's an apples and oranges comparison. His continuation of Lavelle's legacy is more the stuff that is written in the Adam Rittenberg article about how everybody loves him, about how Deion Sanders loves him, Joey McGuire loves him, Sonny Dykes loves him, Morgan Scalley loves him, Brent Brennan loves him. The coaches that are paid to beat him, to defeat him, to hate him, they can't help but love the guy. And by the way, Morgan has this as well. That whole thing, that whole relationship and the dynamic of the rivalry with those two at the helm changes again. Long gone are the Bronco Kyle Whittingham years where those guys barely tolerated one another's presence, and that's fine. A more cordial relationship at the top, even more so than I think Kyle Whittingham and Kalani, who have a ton of love and respect for one another, who are genuine, actual friends. I think that the personalities of Morgan and Kalani are going to allow for this thing to be maybe even more fun and carefree, but we'll see. All right, to the over-unders. We talked about an over-under I put out there, Kelvin Obot. Is he going to start 5.5 games, over or under? I don't know. People were not passionate about that one. I am passionate about that one. I think that the future of your top-rated recruit in the history of the program, even in the short term, is massively important to this year's squad and to next year's squad and the next year's squad and the next year's squad, because that guy is going to be given offers, overtures. The over-under question for today hopefully is something that resonates a little bit more with people, because It's about the much maligned, always talked about passing game at the University of Utah. And I should say much maligned in previous years. I think that the optimism for a Kevin McGibbon coached offense, a Devin Dampier and Bird Ficklin quarterbacked offense, a wide receiver core that is weirdly gassed up as the best Morgan Scalley's ever seen, despite the fact that most of these guys have not been big-time producers, at least in Utah uniforms, right? There's a lot of unknown commodities at this level, but the optimism is really just overflowing in that regard. So some of this is comparative to the standard set in the Big 12 conference, in the Power 4 conferences. A lot of it is set compared to what you saw from Utah football last year, because if you can just be better than Utah football was last year in the passing game, and you had a top 5 offense. You had a lot of that was based on the run. You had a really good, really proficient, really successful offense last season. This year, I think it's going to be done a little bit differently. I think most of us expect that it'll be leaning slightly heavier on the passing game rather than the run game. And as that happens, as that occurs, I want to know what your predictions for the real numbers look like. 877-353-0700 at Real OC Sports. Will Utah's leading receiver, whoever you think that is, and we put a poll out there, it's mostly people believe it's going to be Braden Pagan. Kyrie Scholes is kind of in the mix. Simmons is in the mix. This year's tight end core doesn't appear to have the same upside that we've had in recent years. So let's just stick with it. Like, it's going to be one of those big body receivers. Maybe Tobias Merriweather shocks the hell out of all of us. Doesn't matter who it is. Well, Utah's leading receiver, I'm not putting it at 1,000 yards because I'm going by the Utah offensive standard here. I'm going by the precedent set in more recent years. Will Utah's leading receiver have over or under 725 yards? I actually put 725.5. Over or under 725.5 yards. And more importantly, at least I think more importantly, will Utah's leading receiving option have over or under 9.5 passing touchdown or receiving touchdowns, I should say? Zach, by the way, is holding it down behind the glass today. I've been muting him the whole time up to here. I
was just letting you rant.
I was ranting. How are you? But by the way,
I'm doing good.
Rylan apparently that was too long for me to be talking about the BYU drama. That was I went more like 12 minutes, 13 minutes. That was too long for Rylan. Sorry, Rylan 9279.
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited for football. 2 weeks out, and the over/under you said was what,
725.5. Now, when you compare it to what Utah has been producing as of late, right? Especially you go back to recency bias, and you look at the receiving leaders in the conference last year. None of them were from the University of Utah. Ryan Davis was your leading receiver. He was top 12 in the conference last year from a yardage standpoint. He had 725 yards. Will this year's leading receiver be more or equally productive to Ryan Davis from last season? Now, there's a couple of ways that you have to examine this, because I know that at first blush, people are going to be like, well, yeah, Kyrie Scholes and Braden Pagan, they're both capable of doing more than that. So, of course, our top guy is going to have more receiving yards than that. Well, all right. But if you have, let's say, Scholes, Pagan, and Simmons are all capable of 725 plus, it doesn't mean all of them are getting 725 plus, right? We've been talking a lot about the variety of weapon, the embarrassment of riches, the ball distribution. There's only one of those oblong footballs. How do you get it to everyone and keep everyone happy? Ryan Davis had 62 catches last year in the Utah football offense. The leading receiver from a receptions standpoint in the conference last year was a Houston receiver named Tanner Kojo. He had 74 catches. Eric McAllister at TCU had 72 catches. Josh Cameron at Baylor had 69. Amari Thomas from Houston, that's 2 Houston Cougars in the top 5. He had 67. Parker Kingston at BYU had 67. Ryan Davis had 62 catches for 725 yards. From an average yards per catch standpoint, that's not stellar. It's not bad, but it put him down in the 12-ish yards per reception, just under that, and that's like top 40. That's 39th in the conference, right? So slot guy, possession guy versus big body, get down the field type of guy. J.J. Buchanan, for example, was Utah's best receiver from an average yards per catch standpoint. He had 16.5 yards per catch.
Right.
The more reasonable comp to a Pagan, who a lot of people think is the leading receiver this year, is J.J. Buchanan rather than a Ryan Davis. So your answer to this at Real OC Sports, the over-under, 725 yards, and more importantly, 9.5 touchdowns or more, is partially dependent on who you think that leading receiver is. And now the floor is yours, Zach. Over or under?
Well, like you said, it would be shocking if Tobias Merriweather did have a kind of like a breakout season. Which
Him having a better year would be phenomenal for the University of Utah. Let's jump on that bandwagon. Let's support that idea. Let's get excited about it. Is it going to be something that you're banking on? No.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on that too. I mean, there was a lot of talk about him last year during camp where it was like, oh, Tobias Merriweather might be the top receiver for Utah this upcoming season.
And
wrong.
It's fine.
Yeah. But honestly, I know the tight end room's going to have a chip on their shoulder this year. I think that's going to be a big thing for the Utah offense, as you know, Utah's been known for their tight end room for the last, decade, I would say. And it could be Pagan. It could be the tight end room. It could be Merriweather, for all we know. But I'm going to take the over. I think Dampier definitely has improved with his arm. I know that he also can use his legs as he kind of rushed for about 650 yards last year. And obviously with McGivens' history with Utah State, he does like to throw the ball, but I still think this is going to be a run heavy offense. But I'm going to take the over here, OC.
You're taking the over on your leading receiver having more than 725 yards.
Yes.
Okay. That would put your leading receiver in a reasonable spot. You're flirting with the top 10. You're not asking for a Utah wide receiver to be the number one guy, the number one yardage producer in the conference. That was Eric McAllister of TCU last year. He had almost 1,200 yards, and he scored 10 touchdowns. Amari Thomas at Houston, he ended up scoring 12 receiving touchdowns. So Houston was prolific in the air. They had multiple guys kind of on these, flirting with the top, as did Texas Tech. Houston, Texas Tech, even Baylor had a little bit of that. BYU had Parker Kingston and Chase Roberts that were both very productive last year. Both of those guys, Kingston had 928 yards. Chase Roberts had 802 yards. And if your leading receiver is right around top 10, 725 or more, I put it there because that's what Ryan Davis had last year. If you go back to a couple of seasons ago, it was a more prolific receiving. It was a far more pass-heavy conference in 2024 where you had – this is actually really crazy. 2024, there were 7 receivers in the Big 12 Conference who had more than 1,000 yards receiving. In 2025, there was 1. In 2024, you had Tetero McMillan from Arizona, Travis Hunter from Colorado. Obviously, that was an incredible season for him, playing both sides of the ball. Jalen Noel from Iowa State, Jaden Higgins from Iowa State, Jordan Tyson from Arizona State, Jack Beck from TCU, Josh Kelly from Texas Tech. All of those guys in 2024 were 1,000-yard-plus receivers. 2025, everybody tightened things down a little bit. 1,000-yard receiver. Amari Thomas from Houston was second with 966. Parker Kingston from BYU was third with 928. So there's an ebb and a flow, not only for Utah football, but for the conference in general. In 2024, Utah's leading receiver was Dorian Singer. He had 702 yards on 53 catches. One of the most underutilized elite talents that Utah football has ever had. Dorian Singer is a phenomenal player, was a phenomenal player that unfortunately Utah did not have the healthy quarterback situation to capitalize on. But there's a reason why I'm not being overly optimistic and I'm not giving you a leading wide receiver in the 8 or 900 or even 1,000-yard category, because in recent years, what we have seen from Utah receivers, at least in the Big 12, has been in that 700-ish yards range. 877-353-0700. The touchdown receptions category is far more interesting. In 2024, there were 4 guys who scored 10 or more touchdowns receiving the football. In 2025, there were 3. We have talked about Utah distributing the ball more, especially in the red zone, different options to get that pigskin across the line of scrimmage, to get that across the goal line. It kind of doesn't matter how you score the points as long as you score the points. But, of course, players want double-digit touchdowns. All your runners do. All of your receivers do. Harder to do it in the receiving game in this Big 10 conference. Big 12 conference. I've got 10 on my mind because we're looking for 10 or more receiving touchdowns. So I'm taking the under almost instantaneously on, will your leading wide receiver have fewer than 10 or more than 10? It's 9.5, right? Will they have at least 10? I'm taking the under because the last time Utah had a 10-touchdown wide receiver was before they joined the Big 12 Conference. Larry Simmons was your leading touchdown catcher for Utah last year, tied with Dallin Bentley, 6 touchdown receptions apiece. J.J. Buchanan had 5. Ryan Davis, your most reliable yardage producer in the passing game, only had 4 touchdown receptions. All right, so that's the individual over-under. That's the individual prediction on stat lines in the receiving game for the University of Utah. Much more important is the overall scope of the passing game in the offense. We'll get to that as we start rolling here on the Sean O'Connell Show on a Tuesday. Again, Red and Blue with Jerem Jordan coming up. JT Wistersill, I'll ask him some of these over-under questions. I'm taking your phone calls if you want them, 877-353-0700. Always want to hear your feedback on the text line at the same number, and, of course, on Twitter, @RealOCSports. Camp Sound, including the Morgan Scally piece that we played for you yesterday, is available right now on ESPN 700, on the ESPN 700 Sports app, ESPN700sports.com. Coverage brought to you by Senexel, JBR, Beer Bar, Citron Cooperman, Big O Tires, your Utah Toyota dealers. It's your home of the Utes, ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Talking some over-unders as we prognosticate a Utah football season that, remember, against a friendly schedule might have some skewed numbers. Great point from Cade on the text line when asking about the top receiver and the over-under I'm setting 725.5. Basically better or worse than last year's top receiver, Ryan Davis, from a yardage standpoint. I also put the touchdown catches at 9.5. I think that was probably a little too high, honestly, because there's just not that many receivers in the Big 12 Conference who go double digits on the receiving touchdowns. Only 3 last year were able to do so. Cade put this in on the text line. I don't believe any receiver will hit the over. Could be very close, but I think the ball will be dished out too much to all the weapons. Also believe our favorable schedule will lead to some blowouts and don't think we'll be throwing the ball nearly as much in the second half of games. That is the dream, right? If you're Kevin McGivern, as much as you want to pad some stats for Devin Dampier and Bird Ficklin and everybody else, what you really want is for 2.5, 3 quarters of hard football from your starters and then rest and recovery in the fourth. You had plenty of that last year, right? That actually set you up for a lot of success with the brand new offensive line this season, because last year you had, 6 games where your starting offensive line got significant rest in those games. And when they got rest, it meant the guys who are now expected to be starters this year had to come in and play real football. The bowl game, you had guys that were not starters all year long out at the tackle positions, a reshuffling of the offensive line. Those guys had to play real football for the bowl game, right? So that actually sets you up for success this year. That is the coaches and coordinators' dream if it can happen. I think that the favorable schedule, we've made the point about it over and over and over again, is exactly that. It is favorable. I don't think it is easy. I don't think it is a bunch of different blowouts, because there are going to be growing pains with this Utah football team on both sides of the ball. I think that games you didn't want to be competitive are going to be a little bit more competitive than you thought they should be. I think that there's going to be a couple of games where you hold your breath in a 15-minute stretch and you're at Rice-Eccles Stadium and you're sitting home on your couch and you're just going like, what the bleep is wrong with these guys? Why is this happening? I think that's just going to be a normal growing pains part of the process. I don't think it's going to happen against Idaho. I hope it's not Arkansas. Utah State is going to be one of those games for me, where Bronco Mendenhall's a really good coach. He understands how to put pressure on Kevin McGivern, because Kevin McGivern was working for him. He knows how to try to take a pagan out of a game plan, offensive game plan, because he knows exactly what that guy's really good at, right? He knows how to exploit the inexperience of an offensive line that is still figuring some things out in week 3. So a game like that is, I don't think, going to be a blowout. It's designed on the schedule to be something of a blowout. It's supposed to be like a 3-touchdown win. I think it's like maybe like a 10-point win for Utah. And you're going to leave Rice-Eccles Stadium going, what the crap happened there? And I'm going to tell you the following Monday, what happened there was exactly what we should have expected to happen.
Right.
Where you're going up against a really experienced coach who knows this program well, who knows some of the players and coaches in this program well, and because of his veteran status at the helm, he knows kind of how to maximize what he's got and shorten the gap or close the gap on your advantages. Iowa State, they're trying to figure out so much stuff. That's going to be an unpredictable game. From the Iowa State side, even more from the Utah side, they are figuring things out. All of their best players left. All of them left. Iowa State has been projected to be, for a lot of people, the worst team in the conference. That one might be a blowout. But it's on the road. It's the first true road game that you've got. So tough, right?
Yeah. I do think there will definitely be hiccups in the first kind of couple of weeks for Utah, I think, as they transition from, a Jason Beck offense to a Kevin McGiven offense. And obviously Scally taking over as head coach, and now you got Colton Swan calling the defense.
4872 says on the over-under question I asked with the leading receiver, he says over on yards, under on TDs. That's probably a reasonable place to put it. Another over-under question I have written down, and I wanted to put it out there because I think it's far more relevant. The leading receiver's performance is obviously fun to watch. That person is going to become a fan favorite. That person is going to become a star, so to speak, in this program. That person is going to hopefully, get a little bit of extra NIL love somewhere along the way, probably at the end of this season, the revenue share, cash love, whatever. That's a new part of the game we have to get used to. Utah's passing game, the overall offense, this is what we're talking about with two quarterbacks, with Devin Dampier healthy, with a brand new offensive line, maybe giving you plenty of time, maybe not. With the wide receiver core that Morgan Scally and several other people have been crazy optimistic about. What does the Utah passing game's production look like? The overall passing game production, I set the number at 231.5 yards per game. Last year, Utah in the Big 12 Conference accounted for in the passing game 216.6 yards passing last season. They were throwing the ball 29 times a game on average. And we've gone through the games individually. That average is actually not hyper indicative of what each game plan showed. There were games where they threw 15 passes. There were games where it was like, you know what? We're just going to use our offensive line. We're going to win the line of scrimmage, and we're going to get through this thing. And we're not going to ask anybody to do anything crazy. So the average is kind of thrown off. But the 216 yards of offense in the passing game was 11th in the Big 12 Conference. I'll say this. If Utah has the 11th best passing game in the Big 12 Conference this year, that's bad. Okay, that's not going to be good for anyone. That's going to be a situation where we are talking about a less than ideal outcome for Utah football. The way that Kevin McGiven likes to call plays, you want it to look better than that. You want it to be much, much, much better than that. I don't think you need Baylor numbers. I don't think it has to be 310 yards a game that Baylor averaged last year. I don't even think it needs to be 290 for TCU or just shy of 280 for Texas Tech. The top five go 310, 290, 280, and then 255 for Arizona, dropping all the way down to 231 for Cincinnati. That's the top five passing offenses by yardage last season in the Big 12 Conference. Now, Utah gets some credit for, even though they were 11th in yards, they were up there. They were number 6 in touchdowns thrown. So it was actually kind of aggravating for me last year with the offensive line that Utah had, where you could move the ball, march down the field, move the ball. And then in the red zone, you would have to sometimes rely on weird motions and tunnel screens and like some less direct approach to get the ball across the goal line. It was a maddening quirk of a dominant offensive line last year that they didn't have as great of a finish rate as I thought they should. And we're really nitpicking here because last year's offense was prolific. So Utah was 6th in the conference last year in touchdown receptions and touchdowns thrown, but they were 11th in yardage. And if you're 11th in yardage this year, I mean, I guess it comes out in the wash a little bit if you're flirting with the top 5 in touchdowns scored, but that also means that you're getting down the field with your run game. And we're not going to rely on that quite as much in the 2026 season, I don't think, because you have a less established offensive line. You have a coordinator who, quite frankly, just prefers to pass a little bit more. And you've got more weapons in the passing game. So I'm asking for an extra 15, 20 yards per game from the passing game this year. Can they improve that much? 231.5 in the passing game for Utah football's offense this year. That would put them in the top 5 in yards per game. That would beat last year's Cincinnati team. 231.5, top 5 passing offense, I think makes you the contender type of team that you want to be this year. If you're producing that much in the passing game, if you're balancing that out with, 200-ish, 200-plus yards in the run game, you're flirting with 450, 500 yards of offense every single game, you're cooking with gas. That's what you need in order to win a conference championship or challenge for a conference championship. You need your offense to be as balanced as possible, but that comes with more production in the passing game this year, because if you're asking the offensive line to do it all for you like you did sometimes last year, you're going to be left wanting without the same level of talent. I think this is a talented group. I think this is a group that is going to really grow into itself, and that conversation, the conversation we're having now about, I don't know, this offensive line, I don't know, I think it reduces as the season goes on.
Agreed. I agree with you on that.
However, it's there for a reason. And I don't believe that Morgan Scalley, Kevin McGivern, everyone involved in this, Jordan Gross, everyone involved in these schemes, I don't think everyone's going to come into these games in the Big 12 Conference and say, all right, we're putting our knuckles in the dirt, we're leaning forward, and we're running 13-play drives on the ground. Can you be a top 5 passing offense is effectively the question that I'm asking you in this 2026 season. 235.5 would have been good enough for top 5 in 2025, by the way. It would have been top 8. It would have been 9th in 2024. Because, again, for whatever reason, the Big 12 was a far more pass-heavy league in 2024 than it was in 2025. The number 9 passing offense in 2024 was actually BYU, who averaged just under the number I'm talking about. They averaged 231.3. So if you slid in above them at 235.5, if you hit the over there, you're top 5, maybe not this year, maybe it's top 6, top 7, but you get what I'm saying. You taking the over the under, Zach?
Ooh.
Because, again, this is less related to individual performance. This is less related to, well, who do I have a big body number 1 pass receiving option? You mentioned Creed Whittemore. I haven't mentioned his name yet today, right? Kyrie Scholes, Braden Pagan, Creed Whittemore, Larry Simmons, Daniel Bray is going to be involved in the passing game. Nate Johnson's going to be involved in the passing game. Fill in the blank on whatever tight end. Well, it's Will Monty or it's Noah Benny or whoever. Like, the tight ends are going to be involved somehow. Hunter Andrews is going to be catching passes, throwing passes. He's going to be doing all of that stuff. So do we think that this Utah offense averages 231.5 or better in the passing game through the course of a 2026 season? Over or under?
Ooh. I mean, like you said, with the O-line too, like, we got to watch games as it kind of the season develops and the season starts. But from our conversation now, I'm going to say Shoot, that's tough. I'm gonna take the over as well on this.
All
I
right.
think McGivern has
Look,
more of a spread offense.
I feel like it's a little bit of an unfair question to ask because it's, in my opinion, it's a little bit of a, hey, do you think this offense is going to produce what they need to produce? Because
Exactly.
I think if you're not there, I said it there on purpose. I think if you're not there, our projections for a 8, 9, 10 win season become a 6, 7, 8 win season instead because your offense is not carrying the load that it needs to if your passing game with a healthy quarterback or even a healthy backup and this wide receiving core, if you're not getting anything out of it, if we're just talking about it, spring ball, look at this, look at all these options, look at the creativity of Kevin McGivern, look what he did with really, made more with less, lemonade with lemons at Utah State last year. By the way, for comparative purposes, because it's not apples and apples, right? It's a different coordinator, it's a different offense. Last year, Utah State averaged 247 yards a game. So 231 would be below what Kevin McGivern was able to do with Utah State with Bryson Barnes as a starting quarterback. I love the pig farmer more than most people ever will. Devin Dampier is a much better quarterback. Burt Ficklin, already in his limited experience, has proven to be a much more impressive thrower than Bryson Barnes. It just wasn't his forte all the time. And I love that kid. He was not a pure passing quarterback. And neither of these guys are, but if you're getting what you should out of one or both of these quarterbacks, I think 231 and a half, 232, 235, 240, 250 even, very attainable and probably the minimum you need to succeed in this Big 12 conference in 2026.
Yeah, I mean, I want to back up to the red zone as well, as you mentioned at the beginning of the segment, where, it's there's a lot of motion. There's like a lot of weird motion going on, and mostly red zone efficiency was not the greatest with this Utah offense last season, and more rushing with Wayshawn Parker and Nakari Rogers and Devin Dampier. I mean, Devin Dampier had 10 rushing touchdowns last year, right? 24 touchdowns total, 14 passing, 10 rushing. So if you're really looking at this year's offense, you got to look at the red zone as well on how proficient that's going to be for Utah, as this offense is completely new. We have a new offensive coordinator, Kevin McGivern. We don't know what kind of offense that he wants to run with Devin Dampier. We really don't know until we actually watch, this week 1 matchup against Idaho and then Arkansas and then Utah State, and we go into conference play with Iowa State, Kansas. It's mind-boggling to see how this offense is going to rock and roll to me. And just the amount of production we're going to get from Dampier and Bird, and how much is Dampier going to use his legs? Is he going to be more protective of his body? Are we going to see more, throwing? That's the type of questions I ask, and Creed Whitmore start stepping up into Ryan Davidson's spot with the slot, and you have Pagan on the outside. You got Kyrie on the other side. You can't really tell until you actually watch a game this season.
All right, that's the over-unders I'm giving you today. We'll dive more into this as the season approaches, and again, we've got just over 2 weeks now before you're talking about real football, and we're comparing your predictions to what's actually happening week 1 against Idaho, as Utah football season is just around the corner. We're almost there, people. Sean O'Connell Show continues on Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. All right, Jerem Jordan's going to join us at 12:30 for a little bit of red and blue. A reminder to all of you out there, if look, let's say you've had an accident while jogging. Maybe you got attacked by a dog. Maybe there was a slip and fall type situation that left you with an injury. You didn't deserve to get injured, but you do deserve to have an advocate working on your behalf. The Utah Advocates are successful legal attorneys, personal injury attorneys that want you to give them a call just to explore the options. 801-355-5550. Consultations are no cost. They are available 24/7, 365. Award-winning injury attorneys that are looking for a simple win for you. Maybe it's a minor car accident, hopefully a minor car accident. Maybe somebody else's negligence in any place left you injured. And if you're anything like me, you're like, man, an accident sucks, but I don't want my pain to turn into somebody else's pain also. Well, you got to remember that insurance companies get involved in all of this stuff, and the advocates are experts at navigating through the nightmare world of insurance, of settlements, of payouts, and of making the best case for you to get compensated for your injury. So, bike accident, auto accident, injured while jogging, injured while walking, injured while riding, injured while shopping, injured while laying out by the pool, whatever it is, give them a call, 801-355-5550. You did not deserve to be in that accident, but you do deserve an advocate. Let the Utah Advocates help you out. Just a little tidbit, a little nugget dropped by the NFL as they continue their view at international expansion. 10 games to be played outside the United States. They just voted to approve that. This will be in 2026. There are 9 international games, 8 league run games, and a London game as part of an agreement with the Jacksonville Jaguars and Wembley Stadium. I don't know what. So I guess the league itself did not mandate that, but the Jacksonville Jaguars came to a sponsorship agreement, a partnership with Wembley Stadium, and outsourced one of their home games effectively.
That's kind of confusing to me.
Without the NFL being like, hey, we're putting this on the slate. So we know that these owners love a good revenue stream. And we know that there are ties to London and Wembley Stadium in the Jacksonville Jaguars organization with Shad Khan. So they've got an international game mandated by the league and then one that they basically volunteered for themselves. So 9 total international games. Melbourne, Australia, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, London 3 times, Paris, Madrid, Munich, Mexico City. This continues to grow, and now there's rumor and scuttlebutt that eventually, perhaps, an international Super Bowl will be a thing. I don't like that idea at all. The Super Bowl is a quintessentially American event. It is an American holiday. As much as the international community is starting to embrace American football, I just don't see how you can justify taking the Super Bowl outside of the United States of America. And Roger Goodell was asked about that, and he said, well, I would like to see, before we give another city, an international city, a Super Bowl, I want to see them have an NFL franchise in that city first. And, of course, that leads to the line of questioning, like, wait, so you're going to put a team outside the United States? And his response to that is absolutely no doubt there will be teams outside the United States eventually. Now, we've talked about London ad nauseum. There are Canadian cities that are effectively American cities when it comes to sports. Toronto being the first and foremost, Vancouver being the next one. Like, there's a direct flight from Salt Lake to Vancouver, BC that's 2.5 hours long. It's not bad to go there. Mexico City is a little bit more of a haul. There's infrastructure issues there. There's an altitude problem there that you would have to deal with if you're an NFL team. London is awesome, but no team wants to fly there, especially West Coast teams. They don't want to fly there and then play again the next week after the return. But the NFL, as it eyes international expansion, continues to push towards the reality of not just games overseas, not just games in different countries, but franchises, teams, expansion into foreign markets. We're not talking about basketball. We're not talking about MLS soccer. We are talking about NFL football here. To me, it is too much. It is not a wise move. There's a reason why I'm doing a radio show instead of working in an NFL front office making millions. And Roger makes like $55 million a year or whatever. I guess my limiting beliefs about who is going to truly adopt American football are too strong. And I think it should remain here within our borders. But what can I say? All right, we'll take another break here. We'll come back with the Daily Dump. We're moving the Daily Dump because Jerem Jordan's at 12:30. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Couple of great points brought in my last segment by people on the text line. I don't mind an international Super Bowl at all, OC. It's not like I'll ever be able to afford to go to a Super Bowl anyway. So what's the difference to me? Maybe there is a world in which an international Super Bowl is actually cheaper to attend. World Cup tickets cheaper overseas than they were in the United States. Taylor Swift tickets. What was her tour called, Zach? I know you know. Don't pretend you don't know what it was called.
I think it was like called the Eras Tour or something.
Come on. I think it was called, you know what it was called.
Yeah, it was called the Eras Tour.
Okay, there we go. The Eras Tour. My older brother did this with his daughters. He flew them to Poland, had one of his Polish friends buy them tickets because that was the rule that Taylor Swift set up. You had to have like a Polish billing address. You have to have a European billing address to buy European show tickets. And they got to see a Taylor Swift show, go on an international vacation for cheaper than it would have been for him to buy tickets to her DC show or her New York show.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I had a family friend do that too.
Okay, so maybe I'm dead wrong on this. 78-22. Maybe this is actually going to open up the Super Bowl to us regular plebes. We're going to be able to afford a ticket overseas, but we can't do it here in the United States. I like your positive mindset. Shane also says, man, I can barely afford a ticket, including plane, hotel, and game, to even see a Super Bowl. The NFL's got plenty of money without branching out. Kind of sad it's gotten out of control. It really has gotten out of control. I don't know when. We've been talking about this. I've been on the radio now for full-time for 17 years. And we've been talking about some form of this for most of those years, about pricing out the fans. I remember when I was working in San Francisco and Levi's Stadium was one of the first places that introduced, I don't think they introduced personal seat license fees, but they had the first like crazy exorbitant ones where you people know this if you've been trying to buy tickets. You pay for the license to then pay for your seat. You want to reserve your season tickets? At that time at Levi's, it was like between $5 and $50,000 a seat. And there were all these people that had generational, lifelong commitments to Candlestick Park tickets who were just like, yeah, I can't afford this because at Candlestick, they raised our ticket prices every year, but there weren't these weird seat licensing fees. And the Niners and the new Levi Stadium did this, and that's not a new stadium anymore, right? And it was like a crazy amount of money. And they were just capitalizing on all the Silicon Valley companies that were willing to, gobble up entire sections worth of tickets for millions of dollars so they could take their clients and they could entertain people that way. So the whole thing, that conversation was happening 15 years ago. Are you pricing out the fan? The NFL has priced the average fan out of a Super Bowl. They have. We during the World Cup this year, right? You get down to the final few games, you get down to the championship game. How many teams had fans that were just like, yeah, I have no idea how I'm going to live after this, but I needed to be here. I spent $30,000 on this ticket. I spent $20,000 on this trip. I spent whatever. The pricing your fans out thing has been insane and will remain insane in professional sports. And I do believe at some point we're going to reach the diminishing returns for the franchises themselves where they're just like, all right, you know what? Let's cap this. Let's stop raising it every single year. But we're not there yet. We as American sports consumers are willing to pay, even though we're now paying double and triple what we thought we would ever max out at. So pretty crazy stuff. All right, Daily Dump brought to you by our friends at Valley Plumbing, Heating, and Cooling. If you have a small plumbing job, get the truck with the duck out there. They'll fix it same day. If you got a major plumbing job, I'm talking like main water line, main sewer line, big excavation job. You need the backhoe, you need the cones, you need the flashing lights, you need the apology to the neighbors because unfortunately it's going to clog up the street for a little bit. They can handle that as well. if your air conditioner's on the fritz, if you're worried about, 2-3 months from now when your furnace needs to be humming again, the nice thing is Valley Plumbing, go to valleyplumbing.com, make an appointment online. You don't even have to pick up the phone and call anybody. Tell them OC sent you. They're going to give you a little bit of extra special treatment. But the nice thing is you don't have to go anywhere else. Hey, I got a drain that needs fixing. I got vents that need sweeping out. I've got a little bit of a tick. The fan on my compressor sounds funny with the air conditioner, so why don't you come out here and check that thing as well? They've got it all covered. Zach, are you in a frat?
I never was in a frat.
Okay, I was never in a frat either. Spence Checketts, who's coming on next, he was in a frat.
Yeah.
Morgan Scalley, head football coach at the University of Utah, was in a frat. Penn State frats and Utah frats, a little bit different, I think. Did you see this story about the Penn State bros?
Mm-mm.
It's like something out of a movie. They will make a movie about this at some point. It's going to be on Netflix. It's going to be somewhere. Penn State, and as far as we could tell so far, I don't think any Penn State athletes have been implicated here. But Penn State has a fraternity that just got busted, 14 charges. 14 different people charged in a cocaine trafficking ring tied to Penn State fraternity houses. They were the alleged two leaders, Agostino Abatiello. I mean, that just sounds like some mobster son that went to Penn State. And Thomas Robinson were allegedly making regular trips between Philadelphia and New York for like big-time quantities of cocaine that then they would, distribute. And we're not talking about like little baggies in the pocket type of situation. We're talking about kilos, like the stuff you see on Narcos, the big bricks.
No way.
I don't know. The Delta Upsilon and Sigma Chi fraternity houses were allegedly supplying cocaine basically to the whole campus and beyond.
That's insane.
And this goes back years. There's a bunch of people involved. I did not maximize my college experience when it comes to the partying. Okay.
I don't either.
I'm not a big party animal. I don't do drugs. I don't drink. I never have. So this whole thing is completely lost on me. But law enforcement was able to track these guys down, and part of the reason they were able to do so is because instead of making it all cash and like shady deals under the table and stuff, they were taking payments for cocaine on Cash App, on Venmo, on payment apps. Large payments coming through the apps create red flags for regulatory bodies and things like that. So felony charges for a bunch of young frat bros at Penn State University. Wild times once again in State College, Pennsylvania. And it just shows how boring a lot of us are here in Utah and beyond.
Drug dealing 101. Don't use Venmo or Cash App.
I mean, wouldn't be my first move. As long as we're in the not really much of a sports story category, my eldest daughter started school today. Shout out to the Salt Lake City School District and several other that are having their first day of school today. Detroit Public Schools, Detroit Public Schools Community District is expanding a new initiative they have called Perfect Attendance Pays. High school students can earn up to $100 per week and middle school students $50 per week for flawless attendance during designated periods. What?
Where was this?
Where was this?
Where was this?
My parents were like, "You're going to school. Shut up."
That's how mine did too. Yeah.
I didn't have perfect attendance through middle school and high school, but I had like the aggravatingly almost perfect attendance where you miss like literally one day in the whole year. If I was sick, I still went to school, which now is very frowned upon and probably should have been back then. But it was like the only time I missed school ever was if we had like some crazy important event involving my grandparents. Then maybe I got like one extra day off school on the front or tail end of an already scheduled school break.
Right. Yeah, I only missed school if I was sick or I had a water polo tournament, because sometimes those are all-day tournaments. Or I think there's one time I missed school because we had state that day because.
But that still counts as attendance, right? Because you're doing a school activity.
We got excused though.
It's an excused absence.
Yeah.
These kids, $100 a week. I mean, I know that doesn't go as far as it did back in the 90s and early 2000s when I was still in school, but $100 a week when you're a kid is $1 million.
Oh yeah. Where was this?
Where was this? And by the way, where is Detroit Public School coming up with this money?
That's a good point.
My high school had like, I don't know, 2,000 kids at it. 2,000 kids making $100 a week. Let's say that only 1,500 of them go to school every single day. That's still a lot of money.
That's literally $1,500, isn't it?
And it doesn't go the entire school year. The program does not operate through the entire 180-day school year. They've been concentrated into weekly cycles from January through March, a stretch where Detroit's winter weather and seasonal illness can make getting students into classrooms especially difficult. Okay, so right now, you're not being offered $100 a week or $50 a week, high school and middle school designation there. Right now, you're not being offered that extra money to go to school on perfect attendance. But when it gets cold and blustery and terrible in Detroit, you can make $100 a week. I mean, that is. Hold on. There are 10 weeks where they're incentivizing students this way. So if you go to school every day that you're supposed to go to school from January 5th to March 20th, you've got at least one holiday in there. You've got Martin Luther King Jr. Day is in that, right? So you get one extra
day. President's Day too.
Okay, so there's two holidays in there. So you have to go to school for 48 days consecutively, and you can get $1,000. That's the easiest thing in the world if I'm a high school kid.
I know,
Are you joking me?
Man, that's so weird.
Zach, you still look young enough. I don't. You need a 21 Jump Street this business. Go undercover. Go back to a Detroit high school. Snag yourself $1,000.
I might need to do that. Also, shout out my mom. She's a teacher up in Park City at Weileman. Shout out to her for her first day as well.
All right. Shout out to your mom. By the way, you think the teachers love this?
Probably not. I should text my mom right now and ask her about this.
You should ask your mom. The drastically underpaid teachers who can't get anyone to even like buy them pencils for their classrooms. You can't get paper. You can't get ink for the printer. And now they're just like, yeah, but we're going to pay these students just to show up to school. One of the most aggravating things for me as a parent in this generation of being a parent is that there's an expectation that what was the bare minimum for us is now something that you should be rewarded for in these new generation of kids. Like the reward is supposed to be you get to play t-ball. You get to play Little League baseball. You get to play Little League soccer. That is the reward. That's the thing that you're excited about doing. And yes, we all had our orange slices and we all had our little like fruit roll-ups after the thing, right? The parents would volunteer and whatnot. But that wasn't the thing. That wasn't the reason you did it. And now it feels like it is. I don't know, man. I just don't know. $100 a week. How much money would you have made? 877-353-0700. 48 days consecutively. That's what you have to do in the 10-week period that they're looking for in Detroit. The Athletic put out an interesting article I want to address here in the Daily Dump about the top or the most interesting newcomers in every conference at all the Power 4 schools. And most of them, they're talking about the top newcomers on the field. BYU, for example, Kedu Luave, the Cal linebacker transfer, played his high school ball here in Utah, 100-plus tackles last year, filled the stat sheet for Cal. He was the top linebacker in the transfer portal this offseason, and BYU snagged him. I think when you worry about the absence of Jack Kelly, I mean, Kedu Luave is a productive player like Jack Kelly. I think he's actually a better athlete than Jack Kelly. So you went from NFL linebacker to NFL linebacker basically at BYU. So no-brainer there. Utah's top newcomer, according to the Athletics article about the Big 12 newcomers, is a guy that we've talked about a lot on the show today. It is Kevin McGivern, the offensive coordinator who came down from Utah State and spent some time at San Jose State and has been all over the place, Weber State, whatever. The Athletics article names Kevin McGivern as the most intriguing newcomer for the University of Utah. And look, there were plenty of player options there that you could have talked about, right? There are plenty of incoming transfers that are going to be impactful for this team because your top producers from the run game are guys that are back. Your newcomers on the offensive line, which is a position of great intrigue here. The only obvious incoming transfer that I think has a chance to start is Cedric Jefferson. The true freshman, Kelvin Obot, I think has a chance to start. He's massively intriguing, but the Athletic decided to go non-player route with Utah and say that the most intriguing incoming newcomer is – you don't have to say incoming newcomer, by the way. That is redundant. They named Kevin McGivern as that guy, which I kind of like because he has a real opportunity here to do exactly what Jason Beck did last year, where there was a lot of worry and hand-wringing and wondering if, smaller school coming up, is this guy going to be the right guy, et cetera, et cetera. And he was. Emphatically, he was. This one is absolutely incredible if you are a dog lover. This story here in the Daily Dump brought to you by Valley Plumbing. We all know that Kirk Herbstreit has duped the world into believing that he needs to have his dog around with him everywhere. And there are some people who are like, stop bringing the dog on the field places. You don't need the dog on the private plane. You don't need the dog on the game day set. I can say this, right? As a lifelong dog owner, if you are in a situation where your work allows you to bring your dog to work, you bring your dog to work. Until somebody tells you, no, you can't have your dog around so much, you maximize how much you can have your dog around. And I don't care if you're a college football fan who's like, I'm sick of seeing that golden retriever everywhere. Beautifully bred animal, well-groomed, very well-behaved. Peter Herbstreit. I don't know if I love the name Peter for a dog. I like when you give dogs like just regular human names.
Right.
But I want them to be like old people names. I want it to be like a grandpa's name.
Mm-hmm.
Name your dog Hank. Okay? Name your dog Larry. I had a dog named Jerry. I named him after Jerry Sloan. Okay? I had a dog named Denzel. I named him after Denzel Washington. Peter is just like, you would name your son Peter. You can't have a son named like Parker and a son named Jeff and a dog named Peter. The dog's name has to be different enough from your kid's name, in my opinion, Kirk Herbstreit. But he's a staple on College Game Day, and he has now landed a paid endorsement deal with Hertz. It's an NIL deal. Peter Herbstreit, the dog, has a Hertz endorsement deal. Now, he's not an NCAA athlete, so it's not real NIL. But Peter joins the Hertz Gold Squad, which is a marketing campaign that already features 30 golden retrievers, and he'll pick up the title of their college football insider. Peter's Golden Picks, brought to you by Hertz.
I like that. That sounds catchy.
And he is being paid for this. So this dog flies with Kirk Herbstreit between Bristol or wherever he's at and the College Game Day set, right? Mm-hmm. On a private jet, and eats better than all of us do. Also now is getting paid to be an endorser for Hertz.
The dog is making more money than the both of us.
The dog is making more money than we are, is eating better than we are, is traveling better than we are, is better groomed than either of us are. Well, let's be honest. He's probably better looking than both of us. Peter Herbstreit's got it going pretty well right now.
And he's been on the mic in a Week 0 college football game.
Wow.
For Pete's sake.
It used to be Ben.
That's right.
He brought his dog Ben. Wow. I mean, Ben, rest in peace, Ben. He died in November 2024. I also would like to talk to Kirk Herbstreit about, he's got 4 golden retrievers. Why does only one get to travel with him?
That's a good question, actually.
Feels a little bit messed up.
Kind of, a little bit, yeah. Why not have a dog for like McAfee and Saban and they all get to have golden retrievers on set.
Okay, Kirk Herbstreit is a golden retriever, so it makes sense that he would have a golden retriever. You can't Pat McAfee. He's not a golden retriever.
Nah.
Pat McAfee, you need to get some dog that people. It's like, what's a dog that people either love or hate? Like a French bulldog.
Yeah, I was going to say like a Frenchie.
Like people either love or hate Frenchies. That's what Pat McAfee needs to have on set with him. You need the dogs to be emblematic of the owner. You need them to be representative of the owner.
I agree.
877-353-0700. Which College Game Day host are you giving which breed of dog, I guess? All right, got to take a break. Jerem Jordan's going to join us to talk a little red and blue next. The latest coming from Provo and much more. Utah's #1 sports talk, ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Red and Blue brought to you by our friends at Murdoch Ford Santa Quinn. They've got a promotion going on with Major League Baseball right now. It's called the Drive Them Home Sweepstakes. Take a swing at your chance to win tickets to the 2026 World Series. Capital One is presenting this game. You could even win a 2026 F-150 Lariat truck with power boost, a hybrid V6 engine, a 2026 Expedition Platinum SUV, or a Bronco Badlands SUV. Murdoch Ford Santa Quinn to enter the sweepstakes. Tell them OC sent you. Right now, they've got great deals going on, 0% APR, $1,000 on your down payment towards cars, trucks, and SUVs at Murdoch Ford Santa Quinn. Over 100 used cars in stock, over 100 brand new cars on the lot. And, of course, if they don't have everything you're looking for, they can find you the vehicle that you're looking for. Jerem Jordan, our friend from down south, kind enough to join us here to talk the BYU perspective on all the goings-on as football season approaches. Jerem, welcome back. How are you?
I don't believe that anybody. I love Wonderball as well. That was great. I come to you live outside the student-athlete building at BYU where practice has finished, interviews have been had, and I'm rarely had the golf cart sit on that, go back up to our building. Today is one of those days. I think it's the first ever. So if it's windy, I apologize, but I'm feeling privileged that I'm able to just get a golf cart right here. The reason being, Education Week is this week. I don't know if you know what that is, Sean. Basically, a bunch of classes for people this week. Parking is ridiculous, so we've had to stay at our building and come down and then return. It's a whole thing, but it's a first world problem.
Someday, someone is going to make a lot of money figuring out how to solve parking problems on college campuses. And,
I know, right?
It should be us, Jerem, so we'll have to brainstorm that.
Shout out to Utah Valley that once you get in, you are indoors all the way, the whole campus, inside. In the winter, that is money. Shout out UVU.
Yeah, wow. I didn't even realize that. Itself with BYU right now.
I think it is, and it's a keen question because given the experience and the quality on both sides of the ball, frankly, there is some good back and forth. The defense wins, the offense wins. But as we know in fall camp where the defense can't fully tackle in certain situations, when you run the ball, it looks like a good run, but it's like, well, that might have been like a 2-yard gain in real situations. Yet, this BYU offense at times looks very explosive. Aaron Rodgers got the creativity going. We saw a little bit of that today, even in the media viewing portion, which surprised me a little bit. Typically, it's pretty vanilla, so you want to keep that close to the vest. But during the portion we saw today, which was a little bit longer than normal, which was nice, it was about 20 or 30 minutes, a lot of crisp, good execution from both sides of the ball. The offense was good. Special teams, they kicked some field goals. They even surrounded BYU's kicker, Matthias Dunn. A few guys lifted each other up. Defense make it to try and, get in the way of a potential, pass of the ball. It was fun, yet it was light, and BYU made a ton of plays. Offense looked good. Bear Bachmeier's got this thing ripping and roaring. I don't know that, it could have been much better if, Chase Roberts and Parker Kingston were out there. Like, BYU doesn't care that, hey, we lost certain guys, a wide receiver or whatnot. They're proceeding like we're going to make plays with the guys we have, and we feel like they're good. And so, yeah, I really enjoyed the efficiency and the crispness of today's practice.
I was asking earlier on the show about some over-unders. I like to set these expectations for Utah football heading into seasons, and we were looking at some of the numbers from the Big 12 Conference in 2024 versus in 2025, and I didn't know this until I was looking it up for the purposes of the show that for whatever reason, in 2025, passing as a conference kind of went down. There were not as many prolific receivers. There weren't as many guys with, multiple touchdown or like double-digit touchdown receptions. There weren't as many 1,000-yard receivers in the conference. And teams were averaging fewer yards through the air. Last year was more of a run-heavy year. 2024 was kind of a pass-heavy year. And I get there's a natural ebb and flow to these things. We're looking at the University of Utah. I think this is going to be more of a pass-heavy year for the University of Utah because of McGivens' tendencies, because some player personnel, because the offensive line, et cetera. Would you say that this year will be more or less pass-centric for BYU than last year?
That's a good question because Aaron is pretty 50-50. There's like a 52-48 split typically where BYU's just going to run a touch more. I would think that the addition of Sione Moa to the regular mix, where he just played kind of 3 or 4 games last year, that will give BYU the opportunity to run effectively and run as much as they want on first and second down a lot. Yet, BYU's proceeding in the pass game like I said, there's no difference, and that they have explosive dudes down the field and they have all kinds of pass catchers. So I think it's probably going to be similar to what Aaron normally does. Yet Bear, like, here's the vibe I get. It's like weird and crazy to say, hey, Bear, do more than you did last year passing with less perceived talent. Yet I get the sense that he's going to throw for more than 3,000 yards like last year. The dude ran for 500 yards. He's the first true freshman to do both of those things, by the way, a 3K pass, a 500-yard rush year. That had never happened by a true freshman. So it's like, wait, we're asking this dude to do more? I think he rushes for fewer yards individually. And then I could see him in the 32 to 3,500 range passing, which is wild given the turnover of weapons. But I think the Cougars have guys that fit their scheme really well.
You used an important phrase there, perceived talent, right?
Yes.
Because there's established talent, and then there's, hey, we think these guys are good, and then there's sometimes where you're wrong about you think these guys are good, right? The perceived level of offensive weaponry at Utah right now, for example, is high. It's perceived, though. It's not reality until they actually play it out. Given what you just talked about with Chase Roberts was well established. Parker Kingston established himself last year, but he's obviously not available to the team this year. So when we're talking about the perceived either uptick or downturn based on exactly that perception, who is that going to be centered around? Who are the 3 or 4 names that are going to be compared to Roberts and Kingston to say this is the health or lack thereof of the BYU receiving game?
JoJo Phillips was kind of your wide receiver 3 behind those two. He kind of inserts himself around wide receiver 1 as the most experienced guy coming into the year. A little banged up last year with the shoulder. He comes in with the most experience. Kyler Casper comes in from Oregon. Dude had 6 catches in 4 years there, largely banged up. A lot of talent, obviously, at Oregon. 6'6" frame, good hands. Dad played in the NFL. A dude that was a 4-star coming out of high school, crazy athletic. He's feeling healthy and dangerous. Then there's Tiger Bachmeier, a guy that played at Stanford, played at BYU. Last year had 7 grabs for 59. I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't have 20 grabs this year. Reggie Frischknecht, redshirted last year. 2 years ago, he led all of JUCO in receiving, had 14 touchdowns to lead junior college down at Snow. But the name that people are kind of talking about the most is a guy that, whoa, this guy has really popped, and he's going to play a ton. Legend Glasker, the true freshman from Lehigh High School, 6'1", 175. Great hands, great route running, great speed. Once he gets the ball, it is tough to chase him down. He has been, anointed by Festus Sitake in spring. It's like, hey, this is a guy that's going to play a lot. And when you watch him in practice, he got thrown in with the ones in spring, and now he is making an impact. First cousin of Isaiah Glasker. Isaiah joked, I want to give him his welcome to college football moment over the middle. He's been protected so far. Legend hasn't had that engagement with the first cousin quite yet, but people are very excited about him. And then kind of waiting in the wings there, you got another freshman from Portland, Oregon, Terrence Saryan, who they like in the slot as well. And then Jaron Pula, once he gets healthy, could be a guy that does some damage. A 4-star at Lone Peak that was a big signing. Hopefully Tay Nakua is kind of in the mix as well. But those are kind of your guys, and that's a lot of names I just said. I think the combo of Walker Lyons, Roger Saliapaga at tight end, and Casper, Phillips, Bachmeier, Frischknecht, and Glasker, I think that's who's catching, 3,000 yards worth. L.J. Martin and Sione Moa out of the backfield as well for BYU this year.
Do they need to score? This is a dumb question, but it's not. Do they need to score more touchdowns in the passing game to achieve what they want to achieve? Because obviously how you get into the end zone is immaterial relative to, you just have to get into the end zone. They only scored 15. They only 15 passing touchdowns last year as a team.
Yeah, that was a lowish number, right? But when Bear runs for 11, which is more than any BYU quarterback could run for in a single season, not freshman, anybody. Taysom Hill, senior year, Steve Young, senior year, who took second in the Heisman. That's quite the number. the combination with L.J. Martin, and then again, Sione Moa. I think Sione Moa is a super valuable piece of this offense in a million ways. Good blocker, good runner, good pass catcher. Yes, you would like to see Bear go up. I would love him to be in the 25 to 30 range. And again, it almost feels unfair to be like, hey, I know you lost Jason Parker and Carson Ryan, but like, can you do more? It's almost crazy to ask, but honestly, from what I'm hearing and seeing, it feels completely attainable because Bear has progressed in the offense. The number one thing he's doing better is getting the ball out a little quicker. His pre-snap's even better. Super smart dude. And then he's got Sione Moa back. He's got capable hands. Does it matter if you have a guy that's like, yeah, he had 70 grabs and 800 yards and 8 touchdowns? Well, what if the team produces a similar or better number? Does it really matter whether there's kind of a number one in that situation? It does when it's like, okay, it's 3rd and 8, we're at the 12, we're up, or we're down 4. Like, we need a play here. Like, at Boise State 22, BYU throws a fade to Puka Nacua. He makes the play, toe tap, BYU wins the game. Yes, there are moments like that where you need one of these dudes to show up. But I'm just feeling really confident, and maybe that's just August excitement at this. But what I'm seeing and hearing is that BYU feels like they can do more in the passing game with this group.
BYU, by the way, 53 total touchdowns on the year last year, and as I mentioned, 15 of them came in the passing game, which of course means that you're running the ball into the end zone quite effectively, Jerem.
That's the main goal I hear is cross that line with the ball, whether it's pass or rush. Yeah, it will be interesting to see if Bear goes up. In fact, Aaron Roderick earlier in the summer told the Salt Lake Tribune that he wants Bear to throw for like 30-plus touchdowns, so double the number. That's quite the ask. And he wouldn't put that number out there if he didn't think that Bear would actually do it. I don't think he'd put that pressure just for no good reason. Aaron's very calculated in his kind of, hey, if I say a number. One time he said stats are for nerds, and which I took great offense to. I was like, whoa, that's like my shtick. But, 30 would be awesome. I think that'd be great.
How's the haircut look, by the way, on Bear Bachmeier?
Bro, I call him AP Bear, like assistant to the president, like a missionary AP. Like AP Bear shows up every photo day each year, and then he kind of grows it out from there. And so there's a Samson element there. He also said on Saturday, I didn't want to, quote, get honor coded. He was just messing around. But he looks great, man. Look, I just saw him a few minutes ago. He's the cut's fantastic.
Okay, I don't know if this is more serious or less serious, and because it's a bit of a soap opera situation going on there's a lot of attention being paid to a real feud or a perceived feud or, reading between the lines on some things that Kalani has said and some responses from Brian Santiago and things like that. It's a bit of a soap opera for me. I don't think it changes BYU's ability to win football games this year one iota, so it's not a big enough storyline that I want to spend a whole show on it. But I understand why a lot of people are paying such close attention to this. My question for you is, as the attention is being paid and as more articles are written and more thought pieces are put out, is it changing the situation in any way? Is it calling attention to something and allowing BYU to fix it? Is it making it worse? Is it somewhere in the middle? What can you tell me about this the soap opera that has apparently developed?
Yeah, my 2 cents on this is I'm hoping that whatever resolution needs to occurs before the season so that the season can be the season. I think everyone's excited about football. I think BYU fans are really invested in BYU sports, obviously, and there are pros to that, there are cons to that when it comes to like that level of interest, which is special and unique and awesome. Kalani Sitake, I think that this team doesn't really hear the noise on the outside. You could also argue like, well, how do you not? But I don't know that like any of this situation affects like Bear Bachmeier's planning or game prep. He is dialed in. Like we've talked about last week, the coaches and players, they're just focused on the install, on the execution, eventually kind of later next week, probably Utah Tech and so on and so forth. So my sense is that it's not like a rallying point because it's just we're in fall camp and we're focused. My hope is, like I said, though, that whatever sort of resolution needs to occur, whatever that looks like, hopefully it happens in the next couple of weeks so that the season can be the season. I don't want any of this kind of rumors or speculation or whatever to sort of linger. I think then it becomes more of a distraction. Because frankly, and I think we may have talked about it last week, the week of the Big 12 title game when Kalani Sitake and Penn State are almost doing a deal, that was very distracting. But BYU lost that game, 1, because Texas Tech is good, and 2, Bear Bachmeier kind of hurts his ankle on the first drive. And then 3, there was a lot of noise that week. Like, guys don't know what's going on. And it's a weird time once the regular season ends now, because you're getting all kinds of like, am I entering the portal in a couple weeks? Am I leaving? It's like, we still have a team here, and we have a championship to play for. This team is hungry, humble, ticked off to try and win a title, although they have a certain maturity about them. So yeah, I'm hoping that this is more sort of for the fans as opposed to, in my sense, talking to players and coaches, is these guys are pretty focused, and it is not a distraction, which is good news. I could see where it could be.
Yeah, when you're in football camp, and I know people have some awareness of this, when you're in football camp, a lot of these guys, if they're seeing or hearing about this at all, it's because of teammates, right? Like, because there's
Someone's
like
aunt told someone something and they bring it in.
And then it's just like, oh, did you know that this is going on? And then it will become a conversation. But I can't even – I've tried to go through in my mind all the ways that this can affect, like, the actual player. And it's like, what do I care if my boss gets along with his boss? Because that's what you're dealing with. Kalani Sitake is the center of their universe right now. Yep. Do they really care if he gets along with his boss? Maybe, but today it doesn't matter. At the end of the season, to your point, right, maybe it would. Today, it doesn't matter. They've got practice, they've got lift, they've got treatment, and then you do the same thing the next day until football season is over, basically.
Yes, and a couple thoughts. One is, I think that Kalani, those comments we talked about last week that I posted where I was like, wow, this is really honest and open about the resources needed to win. I think that was on July 30th, and that was preseason Kalani. That was before fall camp. That was, hey, I have some thoughts on this. And he said as much a little bit at Media Day as well. The day they start fall camp, that ended, in my opinion, in his mind. Like, I am done with any thoughts relative to that, because last week, in week 2 of fall camp at Photo Day, those comments occurred, and that is, I don't want to deal with this. I want to focus on football. To me, that was the sense I got. So I think he's like, that's that. I want to focus on this team and football, because if he doesn't, if he's talking now about it, I think that then becomes a distraction. So I think he's trying to keep his team dialed in here now that we're in fall camp and the preseason officially has begun.
I don't want to jump around too much here, but Jackson Kohler is entering the portal. Is he going to end up at BYU, one of the many players that were awaiting a decision on whether or not 5 years to play 5 would apply to people that just recently finished their college eligibility? And obviously you've seen some football players come back, now basketball players coming back. Jackson Kohler from Michigan State is available and in the transfer portal and a BYU target. What do you know about this?
I think he'd be a tremendous add. He was a top 10 offensive and defensive percentage rebounder last year. Super experienced, can pick and pop, can nail 3. First couple of years didn't. He really came on last year as more of a 3-point threat. Obviously, the great experience. Michigan State would be awesome. Member of the church, grew up down the road at AF. I think he'd be awesome. There's just questions of eligibility, obviously. But my understanding is BYU is actively pursuing a guy of his talents, right? And I think he'd be a tremendous add. And frankly, if you said, hey, he gets added to the roster, I go, to me, that might swing 2 or 3 wins. Like, if we're talking win shares or whatever, I think he'd be very valuable from an experience and skill standpoint. Would BYU have a true center, a true 5-man to combat some of the bigger guys in college basketball? Still no, but they would have 2 power forwards that they brought in, as well as Sadim Boop off the bench, that to me give you a real nice arsenal of muscle to play quick, to get to shooters, to get out in transition, that would really make this BYU team a threat to kind of stay in the top 20 most of the year.
I want to congratulate, by the way, since we're talking about influencing and swinging things one way or another, I want to congratulate Bear Bachmeier on at least some Heisman momentum already, because I'm sure you've seen this. The Heisman hopeful app and website is allowing a little bit more engagement from fans. It allows fans to place the first official vote for the Heisman Trophy in this year's award season. And if I know anything at all about BYU fans and the way the BYU fans handled things where their participation can help a BYU athlete, I'm just going to go ahead and preemptively congratulate Bear Bachmeier on at least one Heisman vote.
I think that's great because, as you know, we have a name for that. We call it jimmering a poll. And I think that, BYU fans will be all over that, especially when there's nothing going on. See, there's fall camp and there's stuff going on, right? So maybe there's a little bit of like, oh, I didn't get to it. But that's exciting, Do you think Utah fans will jump on it for Devin? What's going on here?
Well, I think so. I think that there's plenty of Utah fans that are like, yeah, I 100% want to jump on board and vote for Devin Dampier. But there's not, as we're aware, there's not Utah fans in every state, in every country, the same way there are BYU fans. And Utah fans just don't have that same rallying sort of zeal. Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, it happens. Can we talk about Niners-Rams in Australia?
No.
Week 1? That's a crazy game. Like, why is that an important game in Australia? Do I have that right? They're playing in Australia week 1?
Yes. Melbourne, right?
Why are they – it's such a – are they playing in a ASL stadium, like Australian rules football?
Yeah, it's
or whatever. It's called.
which double as cricket grounds in most cases. So
okay,
they're
it's
big,
huge. They're going to be way far away. Are they bringing in seats on the field? I've watched some Aussie rules football. It's actually pretty fun.
I love Aussie
rules.
rules.
Why are we putting that awesome of a game overseas? We need to put some crap. They don't know, right? They're just like, oh, 2 NFL teams. Why do we put 2 crap teams in Australia? This amazing NFC West matchup.
Roger Goodell, he's going to eventually put a team there, according to Roger Goodell. You never know.
Australia, that'd be the worst.
If you're Aaron Donald, do you want the trip to Australia or do you want to not have to deal with that? And so you're like, I'll come back in week 8.
That's not a bad thing. I honestly, at this point, and I've had several people reach out to me like, oh, Taysom Hill's retired. I said, no, he's not. He just isn't with the Saints.
He's just not with the Saints.
Taysom Hill wants to join a competitor. Like, he wants to come mid-season or later or whatever. Like Kyle Van Noy did this a couple weeks in the season 2 years ago with the Ravens, and then he had a career year, and they're in the playoffs and whatnot. So, yeah, I mean, if I'm Aaron, I'm like, I'll see you week 2, bro.
If Taysom Hill could somehow end up with the San Francisco 49ers, and it would allow me to finally be unfettered in rooting for him as just like a football player,
unchained.
Because it's. There's always this funky relationship you have with players from the rival school, where even if you respect the heck out of what they did for the rival school, you can't buy a Steve Young jersey until he's on your favorite pro team, which that worked for me.
I have a Bobby Wagner Seahawks jersey, to your point.
Yeah, right? And Fred Warner. He's one of my favorite players, probably my favorite current player in the NFL. But,
I love it.
And if Taysom Hill jumps on board that too, I'm just going to be like, all right, now he's a Niner. Christian McCaffrey, all of this was like, we like you. We like you when you're at Stanford. We respect you when you're at Stanford. Oh, now you're a Niner? Now I can love you.
I want to hear this from Ute Niner guy. So back when Zach Wilson had the 2021 pro day at BYU, and obviously that throw that went nuts and everything, we did a live show. We see, Robert Saleh and the Jets walk in, and then I see John Lynch show up in the building, and I'm like, oh my gosh, the Niners want Zach. If the Jets don't take him, they want him at 3. To me, that's one of the biggest what ifs in BYU sports history is what if the Jets don't take Zach and Kyle Shanahan gets the opportunity to groom Zach Wilson into the quarterback that Brock Purdy sort of became. Do you feel like Zach would have had similar success to Brock if he had been the Niners draft pick at 3 instead of Trey Lance?
I'll say this: he would have had more success than he did with the Jets.
That's not saying a lot.
And I believe he would have had more success than Trey Lance. Trey Lance ended up being a bust.
Yeah.
I was never even, and this was on air when I was talking. I was never like the biggest believer in Zach Wilson. I thought that, he benefited greatly from the weird vacuum that COVID season created for, for him. And I begrudge him none of that, because go get your money, do your thing, like maximize your potential. I also simultaneously to thinking like he was never really truly a top 5 quarterback draft pick. I also hate that we will never find out, right? Because his confidence got destroyed. The way that whole situation played out ended up being, like really, really damaging to the one thing that quarterbacks have to have, and that is that impenetrable winning psyche. So we'll never get to know. And I think that it served as a real detriment to his career ultimately, that he ended up there. So I wouldn't have loved if the Niners had taken him instead. I didn't love that they took Trey Lance either. Would he be Brock Purdy? I mean, I'm not a Brock Purdy guy necessarily. So I could see it being equivalent to what Brock Purdy did.
Yeah, it's up there in one of the questions I have of what if, what if Brandon Davies plays in 2011 on that Sweet 16 BYU team?
Shout out to Brandon. He just retired, by the way.
Yes, he did. What a career. He made a lot of dough overseas. He was great. He was all over the world. What if Taysom Hill never had a season-ending injury, especially in 2014 when BYU started 4-0, and he's kind of in the Heisman convo, and BYU only had 3 Power 5 opponents that year. And they beat all 3. Like, what could that have been? Could he have been kind of your Jordan Lynch, Northern Illinois outsider in the Heisman kind of finalist? There's a million of these. What COVID BYU team, men's basketball, they were playing like a top 10 team. Season gets shut down. So these are just a handful of them.
Yeah. For Ute fans, it's just what if Cam Rising never had a knee explode? I mean,
that's probably the one, right?
That's good enough. That's good enough for me.
Oh.
Jeremy, you're the man. I always appreciate picking your brain. Thanks for joining me, sir.
You're welcome, Sean. Good to talk to you, man.
Jeremy Jordan, BYU insider, BYU Sports Nation, does incredible work down there and takes us behind enemy lines for some red and blue brought to you by Murdoch Ford Santa Quinn. All right, we got to double up. JT Wistersill takes us back into the Utah world next. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Welcome back to the Sean O'Connell Show. Welcome in JT Wistersill. You can hear him on Locked On Utes, publisher over at the Utes 247, at Utes 247, also on Twitter, or at JT Wistersill is WISTRCILL. JT, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Doing well. Good to be on, Sean. Appreciate you spelling the name, too. That is one that a lot of people get wrong.
Well, I think I probably got it wrong a couple times before I got it right, but here we are. All right. We march closer to Utah football season. What questions do you still have about this roster, about this team, just over 2 weeks from kickoff?
Yeah, I think it's still mostly the same questions, honestly. I think it's still the offensive line. I think it's still the defensive line. And I even think as good as we're feeling about the pass game, I think there's still some questions there as well, too. Let's go to the offensive line. I mean, Morgan Scalley revealed yesterday they don't have a starting five still yet. And it's okay to have competitions drag on, but it's going to be a little bit of a concern. And the longer it takes to figure out that five-man unit, the less reps that true five-man unit gets together. They have a great warm-up game against Idaho. But that's a real test against Arkansas. I don't think the Razorbacks are going to be great this year, but I do think they got some dudes up front, and that's going to be a physical battle. And you want to have as many reps under your belt as possible for that one. So that's an area I'm looking at for the offensive line, defensive line, especially defensive tackle. I think they just need to continue to really figure out who those guys are going to be. Run defense has to be better than it ended the regular season last year. Still sounds like there's some good battles there. And last week we had heard that the 2-minute offense wasn't up to standard quite yet. It was a little better this week, we heard, but we also heard that the red zone offense wasn't great there too. So there's a couple areas on offense where I still feel like this Utah team is still coming along, and I think a lot of that probably is Devin Dampier working with those new receivers as well as those new offensive linemen, getting things situated in the run game. So definitely still some work to be done, but that's the advantage of fall camp. I think everyone has problems they need to sort out right now.
All right. If you listen to the show the last few years, you know I like to set some over-unders, let people kind of shape expectations based on trends in the conference, trends with the team, previous numbers, etc. A couple today that I set, the question at least, was your leading receiver, whoever you think that is, JT, Utah's leading receiver this season. Do they go over or under last year's leading receiver total? So it's 725.5. Ryan Davis had 725 yards on, 53 catches for Utah last year. Does this year's leading receiver have more or less, over or under that number of yards, given, of course, that it appears to be a deeper wide receiver room? You're probably going to distribute the ball a little bit more. While saying that, you also have to respect the fact that some of these incoming guys, these transfers, have been productive at their previous stops. The upside might be higher, although we all loved Ryan Davis. He wasn't the biggest. He wasn't the fastest. He was a crafty wide receiver, right? So when I ask you that question, given all the context that I know you have, over or under 725.5 for your leading receiver?
I'm going to go over. It's like you're working in Vegas, though I will say it's a very good line. You go back and forth because, as you mentioned, there are a lot of mouths to feed in that wide receiver room, and also a lot of guys need to hand the ball off to as well. Bird Ficklin, Daniel Braze of the world, Parker, Dampier's going to run it at times. So it's definitely a tight needle, I feel like, of where this will end up. But I do feel like Braden Pagan's in for a big year. And it's not just the Instagram clip we saw over the weekend at the team scrimmage on Saturday where he's hurdling a guy out there. And this is a first-team all-conference guy for a reason. I've said numerous times on my show this offseason, Utah did not add a proven Power 4 starter. The closest thing to that, though, was Braden Pagan. With the year he had at Utah State, he got several Power 4 opportunities and chose to stay with Kevin McGiven, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think when you look at his catch radius, I think he's a good route runner. I don't think he's a great route runner, but catch radius being a huge thing for him, and I do think him and Dampier have done a good job of building that connection as much as they could for them not even being together for a full year. I feel like he is going to go over 700. I will say, I think Creed Whittemore has a shot, too. That's a guy less than 100 last year, so some people might be curious about that, but I think Dampier and Creed are going to connect a lot this year, too. But I do think Pagan is going to exceed that 725, but I'll be curious to see if he is a true 800-yard receiver or even if he just gets at 750, depending on how many other pass catchers can really step up and get involved in this offense.
I'm with you, first of all. And even though there might be, a wealth of weapons, I'm still of the opinion that when you have depth, when you have a bunch of guys, that your team is better off when there's an alpha in the room, right? When you know, and everyone else knows that on third down, that's the guy that you're sending on the route just beyond the sticks, and he's going to come down with a contested catch. That when you're in the red zone, he's the guy that you're throwing the fade to. I like that for the players themselves. I like that for the quarterback. I also like what that does to an opposing defense, because then they're just like, all right, that's their best guy. That's where the ball's going. But wait, is it not? Because they know we're thinking that way. It just creates all these different scenarios that even when you have a bunch of different weapons, I want to know who the nuclear weapon is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it'd be great if Pagan could truly step up and be that guy for this offense, too, because as you mentioned, if Pagan becomes that guy, it makes everyone else better. Kyrie Scholes is able to do more, Creed Whittemore, Larry Simmons, Tobias Merriweather. And if Pagan could really step up and be that true alpha, I think that would be a huge thing for this Utah offense, for this wide receiver core, too. Devin Dampier, as good as this wide receiver and this pass catcher group is, you mentioned Ryan Davis, but overall, Utah did lose their top 3 pass catchers from a yard standpoint. J.J. Buchanan, who we all thought would have a big year, and Dallin Bentley was a revelation at the tight end spot for Utah last year. So you need guys to step up there on the outside, and I do love how deep this room is. So there are multiple guys in the past, right? A couple years ago, hey, Damian Alford should be really good. Didn't pan out. Even last year, Tobias Merriweather. Now he's a fun X factor this year versus it felt like Utah really needed him to be great right away. I love how many different guys there are in this room. Even a Ricky Johnson's the world coming up from Mississippi State. I think he's a guy that could be explosive too. I expect Pagan to emerge and be that alpha. But what's nice is Utah has several guys that I think could, and I don't think that's always been the case for this Utah wide receiver room.
JT, what about Nate Johnson? What do you think his usage looks like this year? Because he spent so much time in college football kind of deciding whether or not he was an athlete or he was a quarterback. And I think the answer finally came, and it was like, you know what? You're an athlete. Let us use you like an athlete. Let us use you like, run you some fly sweeps. Let us use you as a wide receiver. It's great to see someone try to master the craft of quarterbacking, but it is so, so specific. And when you're doing even a little bit of that and taking away from the time on the jugs machine, when you're taking away from the route running, for somebody like him, I mean, it really set him back from what he could be as a wide receiver, especially with that top-end speed. I maybe have higher hopes for him than most people do. I'm curious your thoughts.
Ever since he was a true freshman, I've been fascinated by Nate Johnson when he was just getting a couple of handoffs or coming in for a couple plays to run the ball at quarterback. I've been fascinated by him. He goes to Vanderbilt. If all reports were to be believed, too, that was a legit competition between him and Diego Pavia. So it is crazy now that, from battling a future Heisman guy to now a fifth-string wide receiver, maybe the 5th wide receiver, 6th on the depth chart, wherever he may reside. But I just think with his speed, I think he's got to be out there for some plays, too. That's where Utah, I'm trying to keep guys fresh, rotate them on. And you mentioned the fly sweeps. We know Utah loves to put a lot of these guys in motion and put defenses in a bind. I think Daniel Bray is going to once again be used in a lot of motion this year, and he's tried to get stronger to run between the tackles, and he's bigger, but I still don't know if he's quite there yet to handle the workload of a Wayshawn Parker between the tackles. But I think Nate Johnson's another guy who you're going to use a lot lining up on the outside and let him put defenses in a bind because you need to account for his speed. He did not get a ton of touches last year, as you mentioned, but still on just 24 carries, 225 yards. That's an average of over 9 yards a carry. He's got to be involved in some different ways to me. We've heard he's grown as a route runner from Chad Bumpus too. I still think Utah will find packages and find ways to get him on the field because you still can't teach speed, and he's one of the fastest guys on this roster. So I still expect him to get a handful of snaps a game. Is that closer to 10 to 15? I think so. Maybe it's 20 plus, which would be a huge credit to his growth at the wide receiver spot. But just with his speed, I still think he's one of the fastest guys on the offense. They need him out there. I'm just glad that it's going to be him lining up at wide receiver more than a Jackson Benny like Utah had to resort to early in the season at times last year.
JT Wistersill is our guest here talking Utah football on the Sean O'Connell Show. You can find him at Utes 24/7. He's the host of Locked On Utes, Utes Authority. All right. The other over-under that I had set for today was of the total passing offense, or I should say the average yards per game for not just an individual receiver, and I don't care which quarterback is throwing, quite frankly. I set it at 235 and a half. And the reason I set it there was because that will put them in the top 5 for Big 12 offenses, at least relative to last year. Now, We can't expect the numbers to be the exact same as this year as they were last year, but that's where I said it. And I'm curious your thoughts on this because I do believe it's going to be 231.5, a slightly pass heavier attack than we're accustomed to with the University of Utah. I think that McGiven has that history. I think that he has the personnel, as we've already been talking about with the receivers and the depth of the receiver room. And a healthy Devin Dampier is going to be a lot more comfortable passing the ball. I think Bert Ficklin, whatever role he ends up playing, it's a big part. I mean, he's got a big, big arm. I could see all this. 231.5 makes you a top 5 passing offense, average yards per game in the Big 12 Conference. I kind of think that's where they need to be if they're supposed to have the season I think they can have. At Utah State, McGiven's offense was just under 250 yards per game. Where do you think that one falls? Over under 231.5 for Utah's passing game, average yards per game.
I'm going to go over. It's another really good line, I think, because just what this pass offense did produce last year. But I am going to go over because of my confidence in Devin Dampier, a guy who played last year with a multitude of injuries, the biggest one being the sports hernia we know. I think he was banged up last year and still produced at a very high level. I also think, as I think everyone else does, the run game is going to take a step back. It will be a good run game that Utah has. It was the best Power 4 run game last year on a yards per game basis. That's what Utah had with the most dominant offensive line we've seen up on the hill in quite some time for my money. The run game will take a step back. So more will be on Devin Dampier. But I think he's ready for it. I think if Utah can keep him healthier, which is a huge thing and why I want them to be very careful with him in the quarterback run game, if you can keep him healthy, he can scramble more and keep plays alive longer as well, too. And that buys more time for guys to get open when plays break down to make some magic happen. And that's something even when he was hurt, Dampier did last year, made magic happen, whether it was against Kansas State, the long pass on it was like 3rd and 30. We know the Wyoming game. He drops the ball and picks it back up, rifles in the end zone for a touchdown. He had another huge pass against Nebraska to Buchanan in the end zone from 3rd and forever. He has these moments that just make me think that he's going to put it all together this year. I think if Utah can keep him healthy, I think he's ready to carry a larger load in the pass game. I think he's got a good shot to be right around that 250 yards per game mark. Utah's still going to be a run-first team for my money. I know McGiven has been more pass-happy, and Utah's wide receivers have been raving about how they will throw the ball more. I don't doubt that. But Morgan Scalley is still the head coach of this football team. He learned from Kyle Whittingham. I think they're still going to be ground and pound first and foremost. But I do expect that ratio to be more 55% run and then 45% pass. So I do think Dampier's got a really good shot to exceed that total when you look at him fully healthy, buying in this offseason, putting in the work with his wide receivers to grow that chemistry and just the growth as well. You know, senior year, this should be the culmination of his college career, best year he's had yet. I expect that to be the case. I think he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Big 12 this year, and I think he will exceed that over-under you set.
Tight ends obviously factor into the total passing yardage, right? If we're going 231, it seems like such a paltry sum, JT, where I'm like, 230-ish yards a game. That feels like you're not a very proficient passing team. But again, like I said, it was top 5 for the conference last year. The previous year would have made that's not even top 10. So for whatever reason, 2025 was a down passing year in the Big 12 Conference. Baylor had 310 yards a game. TCU had 290. Texas Tech had 280. Arizona 255, and then Cincinnati last year was 231.2. So 231.5 over that, like you're predicting, and so am I, puts Utah in last year's top 5. The tight ends have to have something to say about that, and it has been recently for the University of Utah a serious position of strength. Even last year where people are just like, oh, man, there's no Kincaid, there's no Keithy. Dallin Bentley had an incredible year. Dallin Bentley is fighting for a spot on an NFL roster right now. They've always had talent in the room.
Linebacker and running back. They first were going to have him be linebacker, then moved him to running back, and now he's been a tight end for the last 2 years. He's the team's best tight end, I think, and the flashes he showed prior to the injury that he suffered in Utah's 3rd or 4th game last season, I thought was going to be the second best tight end on this team and still be a frequent option this offense would look to. Now he's back. He's fully healthy, we've heard. I do think he's going to be the guy, but I think he's going to be around – I'd be surprised if he exceeded 500 yards. I think just still growing and learning that tight end position too, and the wide receivers taking the next step. I don't see him having the Dallin Bentley year as well too. And Andrew still got some size at 6'3", but not as big as Dallin Bentley was. Dallin Bentley was such a nice luxury for Dampier to have, with the ability of him just to have a large catch radius and make some plays down the field too, more than you normally see for a tight end. So I think Andrews will be good. I just don't think it's the same level. I do like Noah Benny, guy who was with Utah, then transferred to Weber State. Now he's back with the team. I got a chance to talk with him yesterday. I think he will be second on this team in receiving yardage from a tight end standpoint. But look, there's a reason he did go to Weber State in the first place. He's not the greatest route runner of the world, I'd say. I think he's still learning and growing and getting there, and we'll see how he puts it together this year. Did well at the FCS level. Is he ready for Power 4 ball? Time will tell. And then there's everyone's favorite, Semi Talonga. That's a guy who obviously went viral for his one catch he had last year. I think he's going to make a few more of those, but once again, not probably the greatest route runner creating separation, but still a guy that is tough to bring down with the ball in his hand, so he'll get involved. Bentley had over 600 yards last year, as we mentioned. I think the tight end room as a whole could maybe get around that, but as of right now, I think they're going to have a lot less to do in this offense than they did last year, with the wide receivers stepping up and just, as it seems at this moment, lack of a dominant tight end. So we'll see if Hunter Andrews can surprise us. A couple of the players said he'd be an X factor this year, but I'm in wait-and-see mode on the tight ends.
Wayshawn Parker, almost 1,000 yards last year. With 3 more carries, he would have hit 1,000 yards based on his average. He had a really, really healthy average, 6.6 yards a carry. Can he maintain that this year behind a less experienced offensive line?
He will. His average will go down, I believe. I don't think the offensive line is going to be as good, and I think, therefore, that will go down a little bit because that wasn't part of product of just how dominant the offensive line was and him not getting touched almost ever behind the line of scrimmage. I think that number goes down, but also in part because the volume of carries is going to go up. But I do think he hits his 1,000-yard goal this year. He wants 1,200 yards. I could see 1,200 total yards for him if he's a part of the pass game too, because he did have some nice moments as a pass-catching back to earn the trust of Dampier with some plays he was able to make downfield too. So that's something that I'm really excited to see what he's capable of doing in both of those capacities, running the ball and catching the ball this year. But as of right now, I don't think he exceeds that yards per carry average. I will say amongst Power 4 backs with the same amount of with a certain number of volume last year that he had, only Jeremiah Love averaged more yards per game than him at the Power 4, or excuse me, yards per carry at the Power 4 level. So we are talking about a game-changing back. Big 12 is loaded with good backs. I still think he's one of the best in the conference. He's got good power, tough to bring down, but the offensive line taking a step back and how dependent running backs are on their blockers, I see the yards per game going down, but I still see a really good year for Wayshawn Parker, and I'd be shocked if he didn't crack that 1,000-yard mark. I still think he's going to lead this backfield in touches and be one of the biggest stars and faces of the Utah offense, along with Devin Dampier.
All right, I'm taking the quarterbacks out of the equation, and because you have to. Give me the best offensive player and the best defensive player on this Utah football team.
Yeah, offensive, I would go with Parker. I really think he's that good. I think he's going to have that type of a year. If Dampier was available, I'd probably go with him just for what he did last year. But, yeah, Parker would be the guy for all the reasons I just highlighted. The best defensive guy, though, if you look over there, man, there's a lot of guys on this defense that I like that I think are capable of having a really big year. But by the time the year ends, I think the best guy on this Utah defense will be saying is, I'm actually going to go with Elijah Davis. I think being the lockdown corner that he is, Jackson Benny's right there. I think it's very close, but I think Elijah Scooby Davis is the best year of his career. I think he's capable of shutting down some of the top wide receivers. Been a really good, reliable guy for a number of years. I think he puts it all together. I think he has a season worthy of him being an NFL draft pick too. Sticky in coverage, physical against the run. I know he got the picks last year. I don't think he'll get the pick sixes because he's not going to get targeted much this year. That's how good I think he's going to be. Lance Holtzclaw, Jonathan Hall, Jackson Benny, all worthy candidates, but I think Elijah Scooby Davis puts it all together and has an incredible year for this Utah defense.
Love it, JT. It's a little outside the box from what most people have been saying, and I appreciate that. So keep up the great work. We'll see you soon. Thanks, man.
Thanks, Sean. Appreciate you.
JT Wistersill, publisher over at Utes 24/7, host of the Locked On Utes podcast. Give him a shout on Twitter at JT Wistersill. That's WISTRCILL. And while you're having a listen to either this show in podcast form or maybe to the Locked On Utes podcast, head on out there to Stansbury Park Golf Course. It's $45 for a round of 18 on a weekday. It's $50 on a weekend. You can rent clubs. You don't even have to have them in your trunk with you. Just get out on I-80, head west, young man. Right there in Tooele County, Surprisingly close. Doesn't take a long time to get out there at Stansbury Park. Probably going to save yourself some time even going down to like a Thanksgiving Point or heading up to Bountiful or something like that. So get out there, go west, get into Will County, and take a shot at Stansbury Park Golf Course. Great rates, gorgeous greens, and it's really only a few minutes away. Book a tee time now at stansburypark.gov/golf course, stansburypark.gov/golf course. All right. Preseason All-America teams are out. We'll tell you which Big 12 players made the list. It's the Sean O'Connell Show on ESPN 700 and 92.1 FM. Preseason AP All-America team. How many Big 12 players made it? I'm not going to ask the question how many Utah players made it, because you know that when it comes to preseason accolades, this year's team is not going to get those at the same level. But what about the entire Big 12 conference? You got your Noah Fafitas out there. You've got a couple of really good offensive linemen. You got incoming linebackers like Kedu Lawave. You've got last year's Big 12 Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Year, and L.J. Martin, the BYU running back. There's some people are incredibly high on Drew Mestamaker. The perception problem that the Big 12 has is reflected in these player lists, which are ultimately meaningless. We acknowledge that more than anywhere else. If you go and you look at Bruce Feldman's Freaks list, for example, one of my favorite things, we're trying to get Bruce on the show this week. One of my favorite pieces of football publication every year, Bruce Feldman goes and he talks to coaches and he finds the true freaks, the physical outliers in a game full of physical outliers. Just to be on a roster, you are a physical outlier relative to the human population. If you are a freak in that room, you are a freak everywhere, right? And he finds the biggest, the strongest, the fastest, the 6'5", 240-pound wide receiver that can jump out of a gym and bench press 450 pounds. I mean, there are hundreds of these people. It's really, really crazy. And his list is exhaustive. It is comprehensive. He's going to D2 schools, to D3 schools. He's finding the big numbers from the FCS teams. And on his list, I think there's 150 guys on the list. Maybe it's 101. I'll have to look at it again. I think I counted that there were 5 Big 12 freaks. You look at the Sports Illustrated list of the top 150 players in college football. You had to go all the way down to 52 before you got a Big 12 player. You know how crazy that is? There's not a top 50 individual player in the Big 12 Conference according to preseason perception. I can assure you that there is a top 50 player or 10 in the Big 12 Conference right now from an actual real perspective. But the bias belongs where it belongs. Notre Dame, Miami specifically in the ACC, but not much of the ACC beyond that, Big Ten and SEC. And I get it. They're getting the biggest recruits, the biggest name recruits, the biggest physical bodies year in and year out. We've gotten to a place now where these preseason lists, again, meaningless, but reflective of a major perception problem that the Big 12 Conference continues to have. Preseason AP All-America first team. Quarterback, Dante Moore, Oregon. All right, there's no quarterback in the Big 12 Conference that's going to come in more hyped than Dante Moore or than Arch Manning or than any assortment of Big 10 court, Julian Sayin, something like that, right? Running backs. Kejuan Lacey from Ole Miss and Ahmad Hardy from Missouri. Again, L.J. Martin probably gets an honorable mention here as like maybe he's a second team. But those two guys, fine. Offensive tackles. There is no Spencer Fano this year. Spencer Fano was on this list last year, and then he benefited from having an incredible season. By the way, continues to just wreck shop in Brown's preseason camp.
Yeah, he looked really good.
Playing left tackle, by the way, which is not his college position. That is remarkable. Shout out to the whole Fano family. What a great group of guys. And for Spencer to be answering the questions that people had about him so emphatically, so early, it's just really great to see. I wish he was anywhere but Cleveland. Offensive tackle, Carter Smith from Indiana. Trevor Gooseby from Texas, who, by the way, just had an MRI, came back as a bone bruise and not anything more severe on his knee. That would have been devastating for Texas. Offensive guards. Here we go. Big 12 player. Evan Tengestal from Cincinnati. Shadre Hurst from Houston. First team guards. Cade Piper from Iowa is the center. Trey'Dez Green from LSU is the tight end. Jeremiah Smith, Ohio State. Malachi Toney, Miami. Cam Coleman, Texas. All-purpose, Wayne Knight from UCLA. Kicker, Tate Sandell from Oklahoma. No Big 12 players on the defense. It goes Texas, South Carolina, Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas, Auburn, Indiana. Oh, here's Notre Dame. Leonard Moore, they're all everything corner. Georgia, Oregon, Alabama, Troy. So Oregon, who comes in some polls ranked number 1 in the preseason, ranked number 2 in the preseason. Oregon, as an individual school, has more preseason All-Americans than the entire Big 12 conference. All right? Ohio State, Texas. These teams, Texas has even more than Oregon does. Georgia, Texas, and Oregon have more players on the preseason All-America list than the entire Big 12 conference. Now, their recruiting justifies this to a certain extent. Their spending justifies this to a greater extent. The reason this perception is a problem, this perception problem is a real problem, is because you have to be an extra 10 or 15% better than the guys on this list to then crack this list when you're not on the preseason watch list, when you're not already on the radar. Evan Tegestal and Shadre Hurst, Cincinnati and Houston respectively, all they have to do is have great individual seasons. Their teams, I don't think Cincinnati's going to be great. I think Cincinnati's going to have some problems. I think Houston has an opportunity to be a really good team this year. If they are a really good team and Shadre Hurst continues to be the player that they think he should be, then he'll probably be a first-team All-American at the end of the year, right? And the same thing carries over into draft conversation. And then the draft conversation carries over, cycles back into the recruiting conversation. And then the recruiting thing cycles into this conversation. And then this conversation into the postseason honors and into the draft. And you can see it just keeps going round and round and round. The Big 12, the only way to now close this gap is to solve a spending problem that I don't think has a solution to it. But already there's the geographical component. There's the branding component where you don't have as strong as Kansas is in basketball, doesn't carry weight in football, as strong as BYU is from a national perspective and having fans in every state. They ain't Notre Dame and are never going to be. As respected as Utah football is, a lot of that goodwill was associated primarily with Kyle Whittingham, and Morgan Scalley is going to be able to capture that because he's going to be a successful coach, but he's going to have to reestablish on some level where Joel Klatt is still willing to say death taxes in Utah football, right? Everyone is waiting for this team to prove it. And for flagship brands like BYU, Utah, and most importantly right now, Texas Tech, you're still considered B, A, or like 1A rather than just straight up 1. You're not going to be given the same benefit of the doubt as Ohio State, as Penn State, as Georgia, as Alabama, as USC, as Notre Dame. Utah has been, in the last 20 years, Utah has been reliably as good or better than USC on a football field. We have plenty of head-to-head matchups establishing exactly that. The brand can't catch up. It's too late. And that perception problem is used to punish individual players, and then that perpetuates this same cycle over and over and over again. And it is one of the most annoying things that I can bring up on the air because there is no solution for it. Devin Dampier can have the best quarterbacking season in the history of college football, and then he'll get invited to a Heisman Trophy ceremony. Like, he has to be Lamar Jackson or better in order for that to break through. right? Bear Bachmeier has to transfer to Florida in order for people to say this is the second coming of Tim Tebow. Because it's always going to be, if you're at BYU, you're always going to be Tim Tebow light because you're doing it in the Big 12 instead of the SEC. People give Texas Tech a bit of a pass from a conversation standpoint, but not from a true, like, we believe in you standpoint. They just don't. Because there's a level of tradition in college football that despises Texas Tech's new money status. They're not the family that has been the founding members of a country club. They're the tech millionaire, billionaire that got to move in and buy a country club membership, where the other folks are just like, well, yeah, they're with us, but they're not the same as us. So an overrepresentation of exactly what you would think is overrepresented on the preseason All-America lists. And regardless of how phenomenal these players are or aren't, for the Utah guys, for the BYU guys, it's going to take incredible individual effort and a whole lot of team success to crack onto lists like this. Spencer Fano, and to some extent Caleb Lomu last year, really strongly benefited from the established consistency of Utah over 2 decades, right? I played with a guy, and you hear me mention him all the time. Chris Kemoyatu was every bit the offensive lineman that Tengestal is, or that Shadre Hurst is. Every bit, more so. His name wasn't appearing on any preseason list. Just as good or better of a player, right? Now, he cracked some postseason All-America lists, but even on an undefeated team where he was a core part of that success, in one of the media darling situations Utah's ever been in, because his name was not on the preseason list, he wasn't going to get the consensus All-American or the unanimous All-American status. It took time. It takes 3 years of it, 4 years of it, before you could crack back into this. And weirdly enough, Kalani Sitake, as popular as he is amongst his peers, as much as people love him as a coach, they're not giving BYU players the benefit of this doubt yet. This benefit of the doubt yet. I mean, LJ Martin's a great player, and he will be on All-America watch lists. He is on preseason lists, award lists, and things like that. But he's never going to be the guy, the running back, that they're like, yeah, he's better than the SEC guy. He's better than the Big Ten guy. So there's no solution here. There's no revelation I can give you like, oh, guess what? This is going to fix it for the Big 12. Because it ain't there. It ain't coming. I'm just complaining about it. You know what you don't get to complain about? The availability of fine quality, clean, organic, chemical-free meats. I know that if you're health conscious, if you're someone who's raising children, you're worried about what kind of chemicals are being put into their food. If you're someone like me who's in your 40s now and you're just like, man, is my testosterone where it's supposed to be? Are my cortisol levels, are my hormone levels where they're supposed to be? Diet obviously has a huge amount to do with that. And meat, dairy too, but meat is one of the places where the stuff that undermines all your hard work, all your working out, all your calorie counting, meat is one of those places where all that progress you're trying to make gets undermined. Not if you go to Southern Steer Butcher down in Saratoga Springs, 1705 North Redwood Road. It is worth the trip. When you head down there, tell Dan and Aubrey Gunther that you heard about it on the Sean O'Connell Show. Tell them that you want a couple of the pre-made meals. You know, I got $60 in the pocket. Give me 3 pre-made meals. Everything. Cuts of meat, chicken, poultry, beef, pork, This is what I would like. They'll give you the options. You select your options, right? Here's what I want for my sides. I want some clean veggies, all right? I want some good seasonings I can put on this. How do I make it? They'll tell you. Throw that one in the crock pot, put this one in the air fryer, feed the family. There's 3 full meals, family size, for $60, okay? On top of that, say, this weekend I'm having a barbecue. I need some really nice steaks. I like mine cut a little bit thicker, okay? When I go to Costco, when I go to Smith's, when I go to one of these other places, it's the factory stuff. It's uniform all across the board. Can you give me an 1.5-inch thick steak? Give me that bone-in ribeye. I want this one really nice. Give me an even fatter filet mignon. They will comply with your request. They will give you feedback. They will offer input, and you will have the best barbecue food possible. And the thing is, you don't have to go to one place and then another and then another. I got to get my sides. I got to get my veggies. You're going to have that barbecue, your tailgate party coming up, whatever. You can handle it all at Southern Steer, 1705 North, Redwood Road. They've got a membership. They've got a club, so to speak. The Rewards Club offers daily and weekly savings, different specials each different day of the week. It is the neighborhood butcher shop adapted to a modern concept and a modern way of life. So the same way Grandma and Grandpa used to go down to the butcher and get that clean meat, you can now do that. But instead of then having to go next door to the vegetable shop and down the road to the bakery, you can get a little bit of everything right there in-house at Southern Steer Butcher. Seasonings, rubs, sauces, marinades, incredible sides, but most importantly, clean, healthy, hormone-free, ethically sourced meats that are good to feed your family. You can feel good about feeding yourself and your family. Little crosstalk with Spence Checketts next, and we'll close out the show on ESPN 700, 92.1 FM. Crosstalk brought to you by our friends at Advanced Window Products, 801-850-9100. $2,500 off, 10 windows or more, a lifetime warranty on the windows. And bonus, the mayor of Sac Lake City, Nate Orchard, will be the guy overseeing your deal. Spence Checketts and The Drive are next. He is here, if you can believe that, in the Broadway studios. Can I tell you something exciting for tomorrow's show?
Please.
1 p.m., Morgan Scalley, head Utah football coach.
Nice. That is exciting.
On the Sean O'Connell show.
We shall replay that on The Drive with Spence Checketts. That's my show. It's my name. It's branded with my name.
Okay.
So we'll replay it. That's awesome.
Cool.
Are you getting him in studio maybe?
No.
Oh, COVID. Come on, Paul. Get him in studio. Paul, we know you're listening.
They have football camp. You think he's going to drive down here?
It's 5 minutes away.
It's not 5 minutes away.
It's 10. I live there. It's 10.
It's 10 minutes away.
You're his former teammate.
I don't expect that.
I guarantee, Paul, we know that you're listening. Okay? You're listening, Paul. Let's get Morgan in studio tomorrow. Come on, Sean played up there.
Kind of. By the way.
Yes.
You were in a frat, correct?
Well, we call it a fraternity because you don't refer to your country as the shortened version of that. That's the line.
Really?
You're supposed to say.
Really?
You're supposed to say you don't call your country that, so you don't call your fraternity a frat.
Okay.
It's stupid. But
All
yes,
right.
yes, I was. Still am, lifelong. That's what you're supposed to say.
My perception of Greek life has always been ill-informed.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always just like, it's probably not as crazy as people make it out to be. And then I read this article about what was going on with the Penn State frat.
The cocaine.
Moving serious weight.
Sigma Chi's.
Sigma Chi.
This guy, me and Morgan. I was there with Morgan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you and Morgan might have to answer for some things that your fraternity brothers are doing in State College, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I had a few brothers send me the link to that story. Look, here's what I'll say. Greek life prepares you for the rest of your life in this way. You kind of like half the house, and you just hate the other half, and you just kind of deal with them. I have a lot of really great friends from my time at the U, and then a lot of guys that I just hope I never see again. But it was fun to be there with Morgan, and we had some, there is a video out there somewhere of Morgan and I dancing to a Backstreet Boys song on stage during Songfest. So Morgan can dance, man. He can cut a rug.
Morgan is he's of the Utah tradition, which means that there's a musicality to the people here.
Yeah, we were all on road shows at one point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, there was that video surfaced of him singing.
Yeah.
Not surprised at all.
Yeah, it was so funny because the rest of the country was just like, what is this?
Right.
And everyone who's ever been around Mormons was just like, yeah. They can all sing.
No, there's a reason, like, when NFL rookie videos surface, you have, like, awkward dudes singing and then, like, the BYU guy just killing it.
Yes.
Just hitting, like, 4 octaves.
And playing piano to accompany his own number.
Right, exactly. Yeah. No, we're all raised in that way, one way, shape, or form. I did want to talk to you about this, though, because I caught your open today.
Okay.
And I thought you handled it really, really well. And, look, like, we're the flagship home of Utah football and Utah athletics, but you're also a sports talk radio host in Utah. And this Kalani Brian Santiago story is notable.
Sure.
And I think it took an extra layer. As I talked about this yesterday, and we're going to have Gordon Monson in studio today. You can say whatever you want about Gordon, and people do. When it comes to his sourcing with our universities, he is as locked in still to this day as anybody.
He has a trust factor with especially some of the old guard that we can't hope to achieve at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
And Kalani himself, too. So if Gordon writes about college football, say what you want. He has his sources that will give him information. Now, does he get everything correct? No. I mean, Gordon once famously reported that Kyle was taking the BYU job and caught a lot of heat for that. But as we now know, as Dr. Hill has told the story in studio a bunch of different times, like Jim Herman joined my show last year. Jim Herman was a defensive lineman that played with Kyle and with Steve Young. And he told the story. I was actually surprised he told this on air. Jim and Steve Young were in a car on their way to an event in New York. Steve's phone rang and it was Kyle. And Steve put it on speaker and said, "Hey, I'm here with Jim." And Kyle said to them, great news, I'm coming home. He told Jim Herman and Steve Young he was taking the BYU job.
I'm a firm believer that if 20-something Utah players don't show up at Kyle Whittingham's house and basically say, Coach, we don't want you to leave. And this is like important guys. This is Eric Weddle. This is Spencer Toon. These are dudes like defensive captains. Like, you can't leave. I think if that doesn't happen, he probably goes to his alma mater.
Yeah.
And aren't we glad that it never happened?
Oh, of course. I mean, I talked about this with Dr. Hill like 2 weeks ago. Can you imagine the historical ramifications of that decision? Because I always said there are two seminal moments in Utah football history to me that allowed this program to be where it is today. Number one is Pac-12. Changed everything. But number two is Kyle saying.
Yeah. Well, and, that was pre-Gary Anderson being established as a head coach, so you weren't going to hire Gary. Obviously, Kalani wasn't a candidate, not even close to that point. So who would you have gotten besides Kyle Whittingham? You would have gone nationwide search looking for the next Urban Meyer, and guess what? There ain't one.
Yeah, and Dr. Hill actually talked about that. He said, I called Kyle and said, I got to get going. You got to let me know. And Kyle asked him for an hour. He said, just give me 1 hour. And to your point, the anecdote is during that hour window is when the players showed up at his house. And then, there are people that believe some financial promises were made, during that time as well.
Which is fine.
Look, in life,
it's a job.
Yes, in life, you do not have a ton of opportunities where you have the leverage against your employer to ask for more because there are other options out there. You should always iterate and leverage yourself when you can to get paid more. I have no issue with Kyle doing that. But to your point, and Dr. Hill never said the names out loud to me, I don't know where they would have gone if Kyle decided to take the BYU job. I have no idea.
I mean, I shudder to think who it would have been, because it wouldn't have been someone as good as Kyle Whittingham, and it would have altered the history of really football in the Western United States. It would have changed everything for Utah State. Would have changed things for BYU, probably for the better in like a certain period of their time, because he would have been the head coach down there. Man, what a wild ride that would have been. And
Norm Chow? I have no idea.
And look, that almost happened to BYU last year when Kalani Sitake almost took that Penn State job to get back to this Brian Santiago stuff. And it is fascinating to me. I could spend an hour every day talking about the dynamic that I think exists down there, talking about how Kalani is probably the most valuable face of the university, and by extension, one of like the top 10 most valuable faces of the religion right now.
Yeah.
And how there's some weird dynamics associated with that, and how that can be problematic or it can be great depending on how it's handled. There's a different show for that, I suppose. The reason it's so interesting to me right now is because BYU football, like, could it be a distraction? And we had Jerem Jordan on earlier, and we were talking about this. Could it be a distraction for players? Maybe, if you're a player who's thinking about his future next year when his eligibility is up, and maybe you want to coach or something like that. If I'm a player, I don't care who the athletic director is.
Yeah.
I'm practicing right now. I'm cracking heads. I'm getting sick of playing against my teammates. I probably got in a fight at practice today. I want to play against somebody else. I don't care if Kalani Sitake and Brian Santiago hate each other.
Yeah, for sure. No, I think the only thing that could lead this to being a distraction in the locker room, and here's the problem with the story as we sit here today. We still don't fully know exactly what Kalani has been promised and didn't get, but if the promise was NIL endeavors for the players that haven't been delivered, the potential distraction is a player that's going, well, wait a second, I was told that I was going to get paid this and I'm only getting that. And look, I have zero frame of reference. If we use Bear Bachmeier as the example, if Bear Bachmeier is looking at the public reports that Max Olson and others have done about the going rate for a college quarterback, and he hears that Devin Dampier is getting $2 to $3 million and sees that Sorsby got $6 million and Josh Hoover got $4 million, and he's getting like $500,000 or $600,000. First of all, great salary for a young man in college, but could that seep into the locker room where you say, well, wait a second, am I being paid fair market value?
Well, he's not getting $500,000 or $600,000.
I have zero. Do you know what they're paying him?
I think he's just north of $2 million.
Okay, so but so if it's not Bears, it's somebody else that was promised. Because I feel like we have it on pretty good authority that Kalani got his. So I don't think he's complaining that the promises for him haven't been delivered. It feels like he's probably standing up for some players. That's my best guess.
Or assistants. Yeah.
Or facilities. I mean, we don't know.
Right. Yeah, we don't know. But it is an interesting saga when you're 2 weeks away from playing a first game in what people think is going to be the best season of your program in the modern era.
Yeah.
So
maybe ever, because you made the point about 1984. Like, all due respect to national championship, I've never been one that's like, though they didn't win one. You won one.
They won one.
But when you look at the scope of the season and
they played like 4 teams with winning records.
Exactly. So if you can traverse a Big 12 P4 schedule and Notre Dame, who's one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the country, and just crack the CFP, it's the best season that school's ever had.
Yeah. Stay tuned for The Drive. It's great every day. We'll do the Sean O'Connell Show again tomorrow, and Morgan Scally will join us at 1 p.m. tomorrow. ESPN 700, 92.1 FM.